Hey now, happy 2 for Tuesday and welcome to another chapter of An Honorable Mention, the essential Ring of Honor retrospective podcast covering the most successful independent wrestling promotion of this generation. I am your host, Jeff Schwartz, and alongside is my co-host, our expert analyst, the head of logistics, Ring of Honor alumni, and our topic for the show today, Mr. Shane Hagadorn. What's goes on this afternoon?
At the moment, I'm just looking at this. I was given this 20 years ago, high school graduation. It's this little pyramid. One of the signs says, "Commitment is a line you cross. It's the difference between wishing and doing." I don't know. For some reason, that just caught my eye as I'm sitting here.
Very appropriate for today's subject matter, you know?
Yeah. It kind of jumped out at me as you were doing your intro, so I thought I would share with you, our lovely listeners, and maybe even viewers if we put this video up as Jeff is recording. Yeah, we also learned that in order to make the program work, he actually has to state, "You are being recorded." That is some creepy shit.
Laws are made to be followed, apparently. Yeah. They're not made to be broken.
But the fact that the computer knows, like it has to be told. It's like the Google Mafia.
Yeah, the Google Mafia is in charge. Maybe if the Google Mafia would like to sponsor the video version of this show, they know where to contact us. And that is at An Honorable Pod on Twitter and Instagram. If they'd like to contact me individually, they can contact me on Twitter and Instagram at the Jeff Schwartz. Or if they'd like to contact me on Facebook, it's just drop search Jeff Schwartz. Partner, if they want to contact you for a sponsorship, where can they find you?
The Google Mafia can find me at Hagadorn Shane on Twitter or at Hagadorn Shane on Instagram, just Shane Hagadorn on Facebook. And if they want to, watch my videos, they can find me on the thing they own, YouTube. Just search Shane Hagadorn.
We also have a Twitch page. That's twitch.tv/An Honorable Pod. And Facebook.com/An Honorable Pod. Google doesn't own that yet, though. And if Google and the Google Mafia would like to support this show outside of a sponsorship, ProWrestlingTees.com/An Honorable Mention will be the perfect place to outfit all Google employees with T-shirts. You can also go over to Patreon.com/An Honorable Pod, where there are some bonus shows, some bonus content, plenty of things available for fans to listen to. Including a live perspective of Survival of the Fittest 2018 in the car on the way home up I-71 North with myself and my buddy Big Stu, who joined me on the show as we talked about what we thought of Survival of the Fittest 2018, a good show. So I'd encourage everybody to check that out. And while they're checking things... Yes.
Oh my God, you said something nice about Sinclair, Ring of Honor.
I'm trying. Listen, I would like to thank Gary Juster for kindly welcoming me to the Ring of Honor show in Columbus over the weekend. He and Bird gave me a complimentary VIP pass along with my buddy Stu to walk around and go wherever I wanted. So that was nice and very much appreciated. Gary always has treated me very, very well at shows, and we've busted Sinclair's balls, but Gary Juster has always been a straight shooter with me, and I appreciate that. So,
and also, just back to the Patreon thing, you also can hear every episode going forward a little bit early.
Ding,
just
ding.
For $5. Not even $9.99. $5. You get every show a few days early.
Yeah.
And with no commercials, and maybe even some of our random ramblings in between takes.
Yeah,
included. As long as they're fit for public consumption.
That is true. Yeah, there's some things that we do off the air that is not meant for anyone outside of the two of us, and probably anybody that's ever been in an ROH locker room or an office there would know
and
about.
The Honorable Cats.
Yes, and the Honorable Cats. We are, of course, brought to you by the Creative Control Network, so please be sure and follow our good friend Joe Feeney on Twitter at JFFHaha-EE-HaHa-NEY3RD, and at the CC Network 1 on Twitter for all the latest news and notes from the Creative Control Network. Be sure to follow our scientist of sound, our astronaut of audio, our purveyor of production, the Bassmaster General himself, the Technician of Trouble, the award-winning Mr. Zach Johnson on Twitter and Instagram at the Radio ZT. He delivers us the best intro every week that you've already heard, and the best outro that you will eventually hear at the end of today's broadcast, and makes sure that we sound cooler than the other side of the pillow. But before we get into today's show, we do want to invite all of our listeners out there to take part in AHM, an honorable mention Festivus, the airing of grievances. This is going to air on December 25th, 2018. It will come to Patreon a couple days early. So if you celebrate Hanukkah, I believe Hanukkah's a little earlier this year. You
should know.
I have no idea. It changes every year. Sometimes it's like on Thanksgiving. Other times it's on New Year's. I don't know.
Jew.
Yeah, I'm not a great practicing Jew. But please send us a video or an audio clip to an honorable mention at gmail.com. Please keep it 5 minutes or less, and we're going to include you on that very show. We'll hear your grievances with maybe you were upset at a match result, you didn't like a storyline, you were confused why Gabe booked Sami Callihan, or why Adam Pearce booked Sami Callihan, or why Delirious booked Sami Callihan. Or certain people having a title run, or maybe you didn't like the name of a show, like Dethroned, where it spoils the main event. Any of these kind of grievances, we'll actually discuss them in between your clips. Be sure to plug your social media if you have a podcast of your own. We'll give you guys a little plug as kind of our Christmas present, Hanukkah present, Festivus gift to you. And air your grievances. So send all those over to an honorable mention at gmail.com. We would really appreciate it. We'd like to do about an hour and a half worth of show. So send over your grievances and we'll discuss them and see if they're merited or not. And maybe I'll have a gavel that I bang if we agree with your verdict on things. So thanks very much for participating to all who send along clips. That's at an honorable mention at gmail.com for an honorable mention. Maybe the first annual Festivus airing of grievances?
We'll see.
We shall see how this goes. Well, let's dive into it. I think it's worthy of an honorable mention. The Future Endeavoring of Shane Hagadorn. Brought to you by IVPvideos.com, at IVPvideos on Twitter, and Blue Chew.
Woohoo!
So, around September of 2010, you were laid off from Ring of Honor. And this is kind of when the descent away from the company began.
It's kind of like looking back on it. I think that's when I first I can look back on it now and see, okay, I guess wheels may have been in motion of some kind at that point. There was just some restructuring of who was of employment, I guess would be the best way to describe it. So, Jimmy was no longer this is right before Glory by Honor. 9, Tyler's last show in New York. Where I was kind of told that, this is what's going on going forward. What our cameraman Jimmy was no longer going to be there. Things were changing with me, and I didn't really think of anything of it at the time besides necessities. There's the necessary things of doing business, but I look back on it now and I can see maybe there was something in motion at that point. But yeah, at the time in September of 2010, I didn't put too much thought into it.
Who was giving you this information? Who had this conversation with you?
Sid. It was just me and Sid having a conversation outside one day. Just kind of away from everything else. Which, best way to do it, just, it's kind of conversation that was, at the time just between it was a private conversation to be had. So, and so it was a little bit different coming back after Glory by Honor to the office, but for the most part, it was just business as usual at that point. I was still packing DVDs, still answering phones and taking orders and dealing with all the merchandise as far as inventory for shows and heading up the ring crew and driving the trucks and writing the website and yada, yada, yada. I was still doing all the exact same stuff. Nothing had really changed at that point.
So we kind of make our way through the end of 2010.
Yeah, I mean, we shortly after that, Adam Pearce was gone later in September, and Hunter Johnston Delirious took over in September. So September was a pretty big, eventful month. We cut a lot of people at that first HDNet taping under Hunter. It's kind of like, hey, guess what? You're starting with the TV taping. So I'm sure that was a barrel of fun for him. To have a crash course on how to format TVs and how to get the promo. They can just end all of that, and then also having to, all right, well, now you also have to cut. And that was the point, I think, where we lost, but got rid of Necro, Dark City Fight Club, Rashy Brown, Aries got fired at that point. Again,
good riddance.
Whatever.
Was it a short discussion with him on his firing?
I don't know. I think the old man did a whole podcast talking about it. Actually,
he did. They're having a war of words, and I am all in on the war of words between those two guys. Sign me up.
All I can say on that is from the perspective of what I had. The old man is very on the ball with that topic of conversation.
Well, that's one on the scoreboard for the old man.
So. It's weird, heavy into cost cutting mode, because I don't think it's not a secret that Ring of Honor was entirely bankrolled out of Cary Silkin's pocket for the better part of the last up to that point 6-7 years, and that's no matter how much money you have, that can be pretty draining and expensive.
Not to mention the mental frustrations of. Putting in that hard work and having this team of employees and wrestlers, and they're relying on you to pay them, and you're not seeing the growth that you're hoping for with all your sacrificing.
No, at that point our DVD sales were definitely decreasing, both at events and just week to week. I should say not just DVD, merchandise sales in general. I think we're going down a little bit here and there, and we weren't as busy consistently. But that's the case for the whole market. As we've talked about in other forums and other forums before. The DVD market was slow, very slow death. To the point in there, I think we're only now now it's the Blu-ray market that's starting to die, I guess, as everything just becomes increasingly digital.
And it didn't even really necessarily strictly apply to wrestling, where business was down and everything. The economy nationally in the States was a mess. Mm-hmm. The housing market was in the dumps. It didn't come out of its funk for another 2 or 3 years. The auto industry was as low as it had ever been.
And we were certainly seeing, even on things that people might not even consider, like jacked up increased gas prices, when you're filling up 2 diesel trucks 3 times, 4 times on a weekend, these little things, but they add up. And those things are not cheap to fill up at all, especially when you're at that point paying close to $4 plus a gallon, and that's in the States, traveling to Canada, and so we're lucky. Let's put it that way. We're lucky in the States what we pay for gas, because we pay by the gallon, not the liter.
And I just want to shout out Giant Eagle for their get-go gas points.
Oh wow!
You do enough grocery shopping at Giant Eagle, you get that gas money discount. It's huge.
This is Jeff reaching for some sponsorship from Giant Eagle, huh?
No, they're a Pittsburgh-based company, and
okay.
Pittsburgh Steeler fans, so
boo.
Not a fan. Not a fan.
But
but I do like their get-go guests.
Yeah. So it was no matter where we were running for the most part, it wasn't, numbers were not at their highest, aside from some key places like New York. But even that wasn't always like at the peak. Chicago, like New York, Chicago, those were home run markets all the time, and they weren't all the time at this point. No, but anyone who remotely lived in the area of the arena knew that you need free tickets. It's like, just go to the diner, go to the Oregon Diner, go to, we I think that turned into, like, my personal opinion on that was we wanted to make sure we had a full looking house for HDNet, so we started giving away free tickets. So people stopped paying for tickets because they knew they could get free tickets. Like, unless you had that first row, you could pretty much just have a GA ticket for free and sit anywhere else. So, HDNet was not I think us on HDNet was like ECW on TNN. It just paved the way for a bigger company to take that spot, because HDNet is now Access TV, where New Japan airs.
Correct. And in regards to HDNet, the 2-year run of HDNet finished up in April of 2011. April 4th, 2011 was the final airing.
I think we recorded it in January, and it aired. The last of the episodes aired in April.
So that was a major, sign of the times that, you're losing HDNet. Ring of Honor's DVD sales had plateaued, if not started to nosedive.
We weren't setting the world on fire, with pay-per-view buys through the Go Fight Live stuff, or the G-Funks that came before that on traditional pay-per-view.
And at this point, there was a definite need for added revenue for just the overall survival of the company.
Yeah, from the perspective I was sitting in, yeah. Remember, I'm not the one who's sitting here looking at the books and, balancing budgets and everything, but being in the office every single day of my life, it's like I knew what I was shipping out, in 2007 versus shipping out in 2010. It changes, it fluctuates, it goes up and down. Certain DVDs are hotter than other ones, but in terms of just like an overall feeling of what I was doing and my workload, I knew where we were. I could guess financially, what we were looking at.
So we're in April of 2011. The final HDNet event, a television show, has aired, and we move into May. And I'll give you a quick tale of where I was in May of 2011. I was attending an AIW show in Cleveland. I believe it was part of the JT Lightning Invitational Tournament. And Colt Cabana was on the show. This may have been after you guys were informed of everything. But Ring of Honor had promised a major announcement at their Chicago event, which would have been the 21st of May. So this
Supercard of Honor 6, yeah.
And the Supercard of Honor 6 event was the second day of the JT Lightning Invitational, so I knew Cabana was not partaking in Night 2. So I was headed to Supercard of Honor 6, and Cabana said he had no idea what the announcement was. He was totally unsure. He said that everyone was told to be there, and that was it. So, but prior to the Supercard of Honor announcement, I guess kind of give a little bit of backstory of what you knew, what exactly was told to you guys, and what you thought was going to take place on the 21st of May.
So, I knew there was something going on, just from, things I had to do, inventory counts that were just at an odd time of year, and paperwork, and just the sort of business stuff. You've experienced it yourself with business sales. Due diligence, I think, is the proper term, like that sort of stuff. I know that's what it is now. I didn't know what it was at the time. I just knew that there was something going on. And so I for the life of me, don't remember exactly how much lead time myself that I had before Supercard of Honor 6, but it was before when I was informed of what was going on. At that point, it was me and Eric San Maria were the only other two left in the office, and before I was informed what was going on because they were coming up to the office to meet with us prior to the event. So this, I don't know, but I don't know if it was the week of Supercard of Honor. I'm guessing it was probably the week of, shortly before, and I remember it being Joe Koff was definitely there. I'm guessing Greg Gilliland was there. And I remember meeting some woman from Human Resources, maybe two women from Human Resources. I think it was 4 people total. Like I said, definitely Joe, definitely a couple of Human Resources people, and maybe Greg. I can't remember for certain if Greg was there or not. And we just kind of that was the official introduction to Sinclair Broadcasting and getting all the appropriate paperwork, and forms and handbook and rule book and all that fun stuff you get when you become part of a corporation instead of a mom and pop shop that doesn't really do these sort of things. I mean, I'd experienced that in my life previously. Prior to moving out to Pennsylvania for wrestling school, I worked for my local NBC affiliate in Lansing, WILX. So I'd experienced that sort of shit before. But it'd been a decade. No, not a decade, but from 2003 until then I had my GameStop job, so I had some of that too. But it'd been a while since I'd experienced that the corporate environment hiring process of having to do drug tests and like I don't think they did a background check, but drug test and just filling out all the proper paperwork and their handbook of rules and how much of it was applicable to us, because you got to think it's a weird thing. Like we're under the Sinclair Broadcasting banner, but we're so not something they've owned before. Like Joe Koff had experience with wrestling, and I'm drawing a blank right now at the name of the show that he helped.
Battle of the Belts.
Battle of the Belts that he helped produce, but and that was part of the sell to get. He had that experience, and Cornette being involved with the company, and I know that was a big part of making all this happen. And Gary Juster and his involvement with us and them and whatnot. But they didn't never owned a wrestling company before, so it's I think there's a that's part of what would be problematic down the line. As we move forward past this point is trying to fit the wrestling world into a corporate environment, and that day, that first meeting automatically kind of set a tone for me when I'm pulled aside and kind of secretly asked by Joe Koff if I'd be willing to move to Baltimore, and it was done in a fact that it was like really secretive, like whisper campaign almost, and was like, no, that's my wife has a job here, like that's not possible for me to move down there for this, and it wasn't something conceivable for any of us, and I think that's kind of the tone in which it started is, being that right off the bat. And then, other concerns of mine were, financial and, because I was also the head of the crew. So that was like a whole separate part of my income besides just my office work. And so I had a lot of concerns, insurance, health insurance and benefits and things like that, because now that we're part of a corporate environment, those are things to consider. And it's kind of, that first meeting was automatically like Well, they're not officially taking control until June 1st of the company. So we had a little bit of time to. I had a little bit of time to decide whether or not I wanted to accept their offer of employment.
Now, when this all transpired, who was it that actually told you Cary had sold the company?
Sure.
That's not a name.
No, I honestly. Possibly Sid, I think.
Hey, pal, we've sold the company.
Probably. Yeah,
Quote unquote.
maybe. Yeah, I don't. I'm not 100% on it, on exactly who it was that told me. But that seems like the most likely.
So, what was your first impression of Joe Koff? And I just want to say, for the record, I've had several conversations with Joe over the years, and obviously on this show we've kind of busted the Sinclair era's balls a little bit, but Joe's been very nice to me and has no reason to, be nice to me or know who I am other than the fact that I'm a customer the bulk of the time. So, do I think he felt like he was in over his head, a couple of times that I've seen him? Absolutely. But managing a business, you can often get overwhelmed very easily. And as a business owner myself, I can sympathize with that. But what were your first impressions?
Immediate distrust. Immediate distrust. And just that feeling of how long is it going to take for them to get rid of us? Like, immediately.
Wow.
Knowing that yeah, but it was okay. I have, we weren't expecting Nathan yet, so that wasn't a concern at this point, but it was still, I have a family, I have a wife, and we'll see what happens. So
did you talk
I accepted.
Did you talk to Mrs. Hagadorn about the potential of moving to Baltimore?
No, I don't believe we ever had that conversation. It was just like, that's not happening. It wasn't even a conversation that we probably did talk about it, but not as like even a consideration. It was just, that's not going to happen at all. No desire to live there, no interest to live there, and like I said, with her job, we lived where she worked, so that was another reason to not leave. And it just, like I said, there was just this, I don't know, I had an immediate distrust and just wondering, I don't know, just that feeling of this is not going to last. But, also in my personality, to one, Ring of Honor is the reason I moved out to from Michigan to Pennsylvania. And I devoted, the last 7 years of my life at that point, almost 8 years at that point, to the company. And I was willing to give a benefit of the doubt and see what happened and see where it went. Because what I don't know, it could have turned out to be a amazing, wonderful experience, and I could have, you don't know. So I guess it was a calculated risk. It was not a risk done without discussion and thought and conversation to stay with the company. But also, I didn't want to not be in Ring of Honor. Mm-hmm. That was what I wanted. So it was
everything that you're describing is something that 3 years prior to this, coincidentally also in May, I experienced, with the only difference being, instead of a wrestling company, it was a law office, and the other difference being that it was my father's company that was being sold, and I was being sold with it to somebody that I immediately distrusted from the moment I met them.
Mm-hmm.
And I was proven right. I lasted 6 months and had to quit because I saw what was going on. I saw the double and triple billing of clients and the way that my fellow employees were being treated. I can't say I was in the best position to not have gone with them. I didn't really know what I was doing with my life. I was still in college. But the idea of going into that unknown after you're with something for so long, that's a mental trip that you don't want to go on. And you've had to experience it. I've had to experience it. And I think that's one of the things that, helps with our friendship. We kind of have some similar background in that kind of thing.
Yeah, I wasn't. I don't think even like I said, I was nowhere near mentally ready to just be like, oh, I have a week, 10 days to decide my future, and it's like, okay, well, let's see what happens. And so, despite my my not misgivings isn't the right word, but despite my I don't know, that gut feeling, the concerns, and just that ill feeling from that first meeting. No, I went through with it, continued on, went to Chicago Ridge in the Frontier Fieldhouse, which prior to, there was kind of a mass email informing everybody to show up in their, dress clothes, shirt and tie, but that, it's not just the wrestling business, but any business. It's, you're kind of, you're not going to tell everybody why, because, you're trying to keep it under wraps until it's announced. Mm-hmm. And I believe they try to either time it or just roughly kind of time it so that it is similar to when we were making the official announcement in the ring during the show. It was also press released, and I think I wrote that.
Oh man!
I think I may have written one of the I think I may have written because I did write several press releases over the next 2 years for various TV stations and in the Sinclair markets, and I may have written some form of this press release. Now that I think about it.
Very ironic. But everyone was asked to dress nice in the email, as you mentioned, and Joe Koff gave a locker room speech talking about his history with wrestling. What was kind of the reaction from everybody once they heard?
I think the biggest question a lot of people had was, what about Cary? I think it is common knowledge, and many people tell you that the love and affection that the vast majority, if not all, of the locker room had for Cary. He'd done so much for all of us, myself included, and so that was an immediate concern. Was like, what about Cary? I can't remember what title they slapped on him, ambassador or something like that. But
the global ambassador.
But he would still be around, still be going to shows, and I think people just had a lot of concerns about how it would affect them individually, their contracts, their money, there's so much that was wrapped up in it that I don't think was not taken into account.
Do you feel like it was rushed, in a sense?
I mean,
we don't know when it started.
I don't know when the whole process started. If it started when we were still on HDNet, or if it started after HDNet. It just I think it was rushed from the perspective of of having a smoother transition, of really understanding from the corporate side what it means to now own a wrestling company as opposed to another TV station. Jimmy Rave talked about it just as an example. getting people paid for stuff. I'll get more into that in a little bit, but I don't think there's not a remote understanding from a TV station of how to run a wrestling company and what it entails, especially when it's a wrestling company that to that point had been straight up like an independent mom and pop company, that had been run like any other indie company before it, where you're it's a huge change for everybody, top to bottom, on both sides, the Ring of Honor side, the Sinclair side, the locker room, the crew, like every single aspect of this was suddenly different, and I think it made everybody concerned. That you need some continuity. I think is the most important thing. Like I said, this is the only time I've ever experienced this sort of thing in my life, but I think having some sort of continuity in that transition is important, and I think that's what keeping the Bristol office alive was. It was just continuity until they didn't need us anymore.
And that's where the head of logistics title comes in when we do the intro every week.
Yeah,
It's amazing to me during this period of time. June 1st, 2011, Sinclair Broadcasting takes over ownership of Ring of Honor from Cary Silkin, who, obviously we know Cary Silkin's contributions to Ring of Honor are endless. He is the first person you put in the Hall of Fame, blah, blah, blah. Were there any other people that Cary was talking with around this time about buying Ring of Honor?
Nobody I was aware of.
So never anything with Mark Cuban?
Nothing that I was aware of as far as him buying the company. I mean, they didn't want us on their TV anymore, so why would they want to buy us? Prior to HDNet, and I'll talk about this in the TV title episode, there were some other TV stations we attempted and dabbled with that didn't work out for assorted reasons. But yeah, there's nothing I was at all aware of. As far as like anyone else, WWE was never trying to buy Ring of Honor at that point. TNA wasn't trying to buy Ring of Honor at that point. Whatever other rumors and innuendo that may have been floating around at that point, I'm sure. I don't know if you did any Observer Mike Johnson diving for this episode. You didn't.
I did not. No.
Okay.
The only one that I had ever heard was during the HDNet era that Mark Cuban was going to buy some sort of portion of the company, or maybe have some sort of financial backing that would have stabilized things a little bit. But it never went any further than that. I mean, it was just like somebody said something, and I was like, oh, that would be great.
Yeah, never. I mean, we always wondered, hey, is Mark Cuban ever even going to come to a show? And then we went to Louisville for a TV taping, and they decided they never wanted to see us again.
Yeah. Louisville, Kentucky. The home of the Louisville Slugger, the old man. So, at this point, like, I don't want to skip over anything in your format that you made here, but you talk about some raises, the company, SBG, not listening, a lot of inventory.
I think a lot of this was just the collision of the corporate environment and wrestling. Just as a small example, I know reaching the handbook, the official corporate handbook, saying something on the lines of Sinclair Broadcasting employees get a raise at the beginning of the year, and so I become an employee in June. January rolls around. I inquire about, okay, it's midway through January. Haven't heard anything about this. What's going on? The handbook just says a year, after the first of the year, and the response given back is, well, it's not until after you complete your first year of employment. So now instead of January of 2012, it's now January of 2013. And it's and I think it ended up being, given something ahead of that, say in June of 2012. I don't remember that part specifically, but it was things like that. Like, okay, well, your book says this, but you're doing this. aren't we employees? Just things that made us, me, the Ring of Honor office in Bristol, feel like to use the term, the proverbial redheaded stepchild of Sinclair Broadcasting. Like, we were just this outlier office that was an afterthought and only reached out to when absolutely necessary. And I always had that feeling of if you want to, if somebody wanted to look at Ring of Honor and say, okay, well, you've been in business for, at that point, 8 years, and or not, over 8 years, 9 years, and you're not financially successful. Okay, well, that's still, if you're only going to judge at the value of the people who have been there on that, it's automatically a failure, because that's 9 years of experience, 9 years of developing relationships with other companies and other people. It wasn't a thing anymore at that point, but the Dragon Gate relationship, the Noah relationship, the relationship that had been in previous years with All Japan, relationships with other companies. Like, we were selling Pro Wrestling Guerrilla DVDs, we were selling Norm Connor's IWC DVDs. Like, at one point we were selling OVW stuff. Like, we had, and so there's a wealth of information in that original office, and there was just such a disconnect of, like, that feeling of you don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, well, you've never worked in wrestling before. So, and I think that was a lot of, like, butting heads there, and I think a lot of that too just came from the general attitude with which we were treated. I mean, in the years since, it's kind of been said to me that getting rid of some of us was was a really bad decision in hindsight. But at that time, like, Greg Gilliland was a pain in our ass constantly. It was like, you were telling us how to run this business that we've been running for years, and, like, just changing things. Just little examples. Like, we consistently, as you know, or as you will remember, we historically would run our sales on Fridays over the weekend to take advantage of people getting paid and getting their money before, like, really, it's getting their money before they go spend it on something else. So our sales would start at noon on a Friday. And then it was like, well, let's sync it up with when DVDs and movies are released in the rest of the world, on Tuesdays. So we'd have turn into the Tuesday rollout. And little things like that. Like, okay, well, people have already spent their money. And now they're just waiting for Friday for the sale to come around. A lot of the new website and the new logo design and ripping off Taz's artwork, Taz's colors is a joke. Like, the hideousness of the website, it just felt like such a disconnect between our corporate level, so to speak, and us, and that our information, our knowledge was had no value. That's how it felt, is that I had no value anymore. As far as the experience didn't matter, because none of us had a degree in business.
You mentioned the orange and black thing real quick. It just kind of occurred to me as you said that. I don't think it was a ripoff of Taz. I think it was a ripoff of the Baltimore Orioles.
Well, definitely. But in wrestling terms, it's like you see that orange and black, and the first thing you think of is Taz. Yeah, but changing, and I get it, changing the logo and kind of cementing the company as your own. And changing the website and making it your own, and farming it out to someone who works in another country, so we have a complete lack of communication because there's such a time difference in getting website stuff done, and problems like I'm sure you experiencing them, when we the first transition over to the new website, like, it was problems, very, very problematic. Our ordering system was problematic. The whole thing changed. Like, the people's accounts changed. Like, everything that there was, tried to port as much as we can over, but a lot of it changed, and it was, I think there were problems for everybody, for us managing the system, for customers on your end, trying to do this. And it just, there was a certain corporate way of doing things, and this is just in the office. I'm not even, this isn't even talking about on the road.
And that's kind of in the grand scheme of things, something that speaks to the bigger picture. When you purchase a company, an entity, there is going to be a time of transition, but that's something that in many cases, especially with professional wrestling, you can't prepare for all the little things where if column A happens, column B will happen, but you also might get column C and you might not get column D. And you just go right to E, F, maybe G, maybe H. There are so many different things that could happen that you're not prepared for, and having only yourself and a couple of the other people that were in the office at that time, that's not enough people in the Army to win that war.
Well, and I guess it wasn't what's the word I'm looking for? I guess it didn't feel like a war because you knew we couldn't. It's not like we were trying to win. It was just trying to be heard.
No, I didn't want to use the word war in terms of like violence or winning or anything like that. But like, it's a battle to just kind of take control and get organized and get everybody on the same page when nobody knows each other and nobody knows their strengths or weaknesses.
Nobody knows each other. We're hours apart from each other physically. And again, just kind of that general feeling of being treated like
second-class citizens.
Second class, I often thought of like looking back on it as, even at the time, like looking back, just a couple months into it and thinking, if I hadn't, decided to stay, they had nothing in place that I was aware of. They had nothing in place to fill that void if the entire Bristol office had just said, we're good, we'll go find something else. There was, I think, more a feeling of like, we have them by the balls sort of thing from the higher level. That, they weren't going anywhere because they live and breathe Ring of Honor, which I did,
And that's the kind of thing that they should be embracing.
And it felt more like taking advantage of and abusing. Mm-hmm. And that's more what it felt like. We can treat them like dirt because they're not going anywhere. They'll take it.
So we would move forward. We have about 4 months worth of Sinclair shows as we started the new company.
And in those shows, like the best. I mean, their first show was an iPay-per-view.
Yes,
it was that Best in the World show out of New York, and I mean, right off the bat, you're having, it's like suddenly, all right, company, well, you have to deal with now transit issues, reimbursing guys for their transit, because that's how it's always been done in pro wrestling, and always been done in Ring of Honor. So it's like, all right, we're just going to change the entire way business is done 3 weeks after we took over the company. Asking a wrestler who has always been paid cash, now they've had to use that cash to get their taxi to the airport, pay for their rental car, pay for tolls, whatever. Well, now you have a check. What the fuck am I supposed to do with a check? It's Saturday night at 3:00 in the morning at the end of the show. Like, I can't go to the bank and cash it. Like, but that's the corporate environment right there. Is you fill out your reimbursement form for your taxes. I mean, for your tolls and your gas and your driving, and you submit it, and then it's approved, and then you'll be issued a check in sometime. Eventually, you'll get a check that reimburses you for it. It doesn't work. It didn't work that way. These aren't employees of the company. This isn't those of us in the office. We are the employees, so maybe that's a little different. But to expect, the wrestlers and the guys in the locker room, the girls in the locker room, to operate in that same capacity was just kind of like a big, what the fuck is going on here?
Was this explained to the wrestlers? that this is how things were going to be done going forward, or was it just done and they were like, surprise?
This is one of those moments where, man, I wish I hadn't scorched earthed my emails, because I'm sure I could answer that question more definitively if I still had all of my emails.
Well, if anybody out there in the Miami, Florida area can find Rhett Titus's cell phone that he lost, they have access to all these emails.
Oh, jeez. The but I don't know 100% if the locker room knew how it was going to affect them in that way. I think it was definitely a surprise. We used to simple stuff, like we used to every couple shows we would bundle up DVDs that people to give everybody their copy of the shows they were on. If you weren't on a show, you didn't get a copy of it. But if you were on it, you got a copy of it, and it would just, we'd make the bundle packages before we go to the event, and like, all right, here's the last 3 shows you were on, instead of, you don't want to do it every single show. But, no, so even that changed. Like, can I get my DVDs? Sorry, we have to now do them all in the office and put them into inventory and ship them out. So now, in my mind, we're unnecessarily spending money on postage, and we can just give them to people. It's pennies, but
it adds up.
It adds up, and I don't know. There's weird. It's one of those weird things where sometimes you find businesses worry about their pennies, but not about their dollars.
That is the story of my life in my professional career.
I'm concerned about the podcast. End up being concerned about the 30 cents more something might cost, but not about the $3,000 more it might cost, because I just want to get a different ring, So it's now you're melding like the corporate landscape into this wrestling landscape that's been run. It was constant, like bam, 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 butting heads in so many ways. I can only wonder how many guys were just frustrated in the locker room by all this, because it was just suddenly like it was a whole new world.
Now you're singing on videotape. Yeah. Well,
yep.
I understand that the logistical chaos. And I hate to keep using that word, but that's what it is. The chaos that ensued of the logistics, the unknowns. There's so many different things that go into putting together a wrestling show. Not only from just the in-ring. It's not just, okay, so-and-so is going to beat so-and-so and they're going to have this much time and then that's it. There's so much more to be established from a business perspective if you want to run a successful operation. And
it was from the ground up. I mean, finding a venue, booking a venue, getting the tickets, putting the tickets on sale, getting the talent, flights, rental cars, hotel rooms. Excuse me. The techs to run the lighting, electric. The electrics side of things, generators if you need it, concessions if it's a building where you're going to sell them, or if the building sells them themselves, figuring out who gets the money from those, you or the building. Do we have to pay people at the building, like security at the Manhattan Center? Are we limited? Do we have to be in and out of the building by a certain time, and we're just going to lie to them and pretend like we will and suffer the consequences? Rentals of tables and chairs, like there's so many little things. Making sure I had a fucking ring crew at shows, because there are some shows that are like, cool, I have enough people to fill it to drive a truck, and I'm praying people come from elsewhere and help us set up. Okay, well then how do we compensate those people that show up to help us that we would used to throw like $25-$30 to, and now we're not allowed to give away, not allowed to dispense cash to anybody, like no cash sort of thing at the beginning. So there's so much that happens, and you as a fan, you might not think about all that because you don't need to. It's not your concern. It's not your care. But from the perspective of it hell, even getting to the shows. It was a huge hassle of getting tolls paid for and gas, because it was like, well, you need to out of pocket this. I'm like, I ain't got enough fucking money to pay for gas for 2 ring trucks diesel to get to Canada and back. Or, it's one thing to go to the Armory and come back, or go to the arena and come back, or even drive to New York and come back. But Canada, as an example, the North Carolina South Carolina loop that we had, where the trucks broke down and gas, and this doesn't. No, just no. I don't care if it's one of those moments where it's like, I don't care if I'm getting reimbursed. I'm going to get reimbursed in a couple, 3-4 weeks, and I just literally dumped $500 on my credit card to put gas in 2 trucks. Like, no, there needs to be a better system, and eventually there would be like gas cards and shit. But right off from the beginning, it was like, no, I'm not doing it. Like, you want me to drive your truck? I can't afford to do this. If you want me to drive your trucks, I can't afford to put tolls out of my pocket and gas out of my pocket. It's not whether you're paying me back or not. I can't do it. Find another way.
So that leads us into Death Before Dishonor 9 in New York City. And Jim Cornette would bring ring skirts to New York City, even though the next shows are in Louisville?
Yeah, I didn't understand that at the time either, because they brought us the skirts. I mean, I don't know if they came from somewhere else, but, we had figured, well, one, with, oh, fuck, what had it been? In August, the first set of TV tapings.
In Chicago.
In Chicago. We got out there a day early because we got a new ring. A WWE style ring. Like, you can look at it. It's the same. That's what we were told. The same kind of ring. Lord knows how much it actually cost, or Lord knows how much we paid for it, how much it actually cost, and we used to joke of how much profit did Danny Davis and Jim get off this thing? Because it was like an entirely different ring. I mean, and Danny Davis we went in there a day early to set the ring up. Danny Davis came. OVW Danny Davis, not referee.
Not the
Danny
referee.
Davis, just to clarify for anyone out there who only knows Heart Foundation referee Danny Davis, to help like show it, because it was a different sort of ring, where the beams, because one of the big problems you have with the wrestling ring is from the constant bumping, the metal bends, and these were beams that you could actually flip. So you could, it's getting a little too bent on one side, flip it over so it bends it back in. And it was a bigger ring, more WWE. It was a 20 foot. It was a 20 by 20 with that extra. There was very little apron room in the Ring of Honor ring prior to this, so people could take stupid bumps to stand. And
they still do.
And they still do, to stand on, So we had that little bit of extra space on the outside. It was the corner post that looked like my microphone instead of the squared off edges that cut people's hands and feet and faces and everything else. So we'd kind of learn how this ring was different than the ring we'd been dealing, because we'd essentially been dealing with the same sort of ring for my entire tenure in Ring of Honor. I wish I could remember the guy's name who delivered him off the top of my head, but I'm drawing a blank right now. But he was a character himself. And so there was that whole process of doing that. And there were new ring skirts that were made for this ring that Jim brought to New York. Jim and Stacy brought to New York. And given to me to bring to Louisville. Weird. Whatever. Didn't make sense to me. But I guess just to put them so they were no longer their responsibility. They were now ours. They went directly under the ring. And they, as the head of crew, and I guess it ultimately falls on my shoulders to be responsible for everything. But it's also very difficult to keep track of absolutely everything that goes together, in this production. So We unpacked that before Dishonor 9. We load everything back up into the truck, which is anybody who's been in the Manhattan Center or helped us do it, is a very lengthy process from the Grand Ballroom to the Hammerstein and out the doors. It's not hard, it's just time consuming. So we get to, take everything back, unpack everything. At this point, I was not, I was just having Hunter's students, whoever was there, unpack and load, or if we were shows that were close together, we would just keep the rental truck. But at that, a lot of that they didn't want to do. It's like return it. I'd rather return it and not pay for it for 4 days and then re-rent it and make you guys unpack it and repack it. Whatever. Eventually, you'd rent a storage unit for it. And so it wasn't until we went to reload, or I went in there for something and was looking and saw that those new skirts were not anywhere to be found. I asked one of my guys who lived in the New York area to go to the Hammerstein, to go to the Manhattan Center and look for them. And he did, and nowhere to be found. Like, how the fuck did he go that completely missing that they're nowhere to be found upstairs? I hate to think somebody stole it, but it happened to us before that people who worked there stole shit from guys' bags in the locker room. Searched, went back and find the truck that we back to Penske, whose trucks we were renting. Nothing wasn't left in there, and just literally there was nowhere to be found. And we're kind of like the 0 hour, more or less. So as we're on the drive to Louisville, someone who has Stacy Cornett's number calls her, is there any chance in hell you guys took these? Took them back with you? We have looked absolutely everywhere. They're nowhere to be found. Nothing. So then it became someone's job. I think Sid was managed to put it, because this is what Sid does. Makes shit out of, appear. He manages to make things happen.
Makes
He's a magician.
beans out of shinola, as my grandmother would say.
Nice. And they managed collectively to make ring skirts appear in Louisville. But that didn't stop shit from blowing up in Louisville.
And on the 6th year anniversary of Joe versus Kobashi, you're in Louisville for TV tapings for Sinclair. And you have a confrontation with the husband of Stacy Cornett, Mr. Jim Cornette.
First off, this is another one of those things where it's like we end up in Louisville for the same reason we ended up in Louisville with HDNet. It's like convincing that it's very cheap. There's not much. Things are already, it's a building for wrestling. There's no other purpose for the OVW arena. So it's cheap. Then they got there, and it's kind of the same reaction as HDNet had. Like, what the fuck? But it didn't stop them from running a second TV taping there.
No.
But it went from, it's kind of what I said before, when we talked in the Steen episode in the archives. We looked fucking Bush League, running TV there, for a company that was now owned by one of the biggest. At that point, Sinclair didn't own any major market TV stations. They owned a fuck ton of lesser market TV stations, though. They are, yeah. And I thought running there, going back there, made us look cheap, and made us look cheap on HDNet. It made us look cheap on Sinclair, and yet here we were again. Let's go back to the market that killed HDNet. And I'm sitting in the bleachers with Grizzly Redwood and Ernie Osiris, if I remember, and Jim comes in, and I do the traditional wrestling thing. Get up. At this point, I had never had a problem with him personally.
Wow. That's impressive, considering how long he had been around at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I had never had a personal problem, and he had been helpful in some ways to me, from minor ways, as a character. But this was the first time I ever got to see everything I'd ever read about and heard about from countless other sources of information in the history of professional wrestling. Getting up to say hi and do the handshake bullshit and get the something along the lines of, if you come near me, I'm going to fucking kill you or fucking choke you to death or something along those lines. And I just had that moment of wanting to push it to see what happens if I walk there, and having my guys just kind of be like, no, just sit down. And at this point, I was no longer on TV. I was no longer being used.
You're the Kings of Wrestling.
The Kings of Wrestling were gone.
August.
They'd finished up after the first TV taping in August. We said our goodbyes then, and I'd already pitched the Stina's Right thing to Hunter for something for me to do, and they actually used my Stina's Right shirts on some of the people in the crowd, like 3 of them. It wasn't like this.
Well, when there's only 100
fans,
people in
like,
attendance, and you gotta have,
my idea was being used on TV, but I was not. And my initial pitch was actually for the Death Before Dishonor pre-show, and then just kind of was like, no, not yet. For the reveal of like me being the guy letting Kevin in the door. And so I had nothing to do. Like, I literally just spent the rest of the weekend just kind of like sitting around. Prior to that night, though, prior to the show getting started, I'm sitting outside filming promos and kind of teaching Ernie how to run cameras too. That way, like, when I was too busy to do something, he would film promos too. Kind of teaching him. So we were sitting outside, and there was kind of like a loading dock area with we pull up to the trucks or whatever to take everything out. Me and Ernie were sitting over there, and Joe comes to me and asks me about it, and I tell him what happened. I'm just sitting on a rail, talking to him because I don't know. I'm talking. I don't think I ever came off as anything, but I don't think he liked the way I talked to him that day, because I was very much just like, I don't know. It was still that feeling. That feeling never left. That feeling I had from day one of, I don't trust these people, and I'm just literally waiting for them to get rid of us. Every day it was like, when are we going to be done? And it was a fucking horrible way to live, and I don't know why I did that to myself. I mean, I know why I did that to myself, because I wanted to be part of Ring of Honor, and I was going to suck it up and see how it went. But it was a consistent feeling of just wondering when they were going to pull the plug on Bristol. And I'm sure that came out in any interaction that I had with anybody from that office. The only one I had ever any kind of positive for the longest time, like, really interactions with probably Jeff Jones, and then
from ECW.
From ECW, and then Mark Brown when he started working for the company as well. But like Greg, the guy that replaced Greg, whose name I don't remember because he was a giant tool bag, and then Greg came back. Yeah, Joe and Mark Davis, like, none of them. I had no positive interactions with pretty much anybody on that side of things for the entire time I was part of the company. Do you think it
was because they were bad people, or it was just they wanted to phase you guys out? And
I think it was a process. I think there was a process of how are we going to phase them out, which I would later have confirmation that that's pretty much what was going on.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, to some extent. I don't know how much of it I should, but because it's not just my story. That's one thing to remember. This is not just my story.
Correct.
It's a story that involves a lot of people. I only will tell like me. I'm not going to talk for other people and say what happened with them. Besides cut and dry facts, this is all my personal experiences as far as my interactions with that side of things. So Joe comes back, has a conversation with me about what happened, and Ernie was right there. So it's like, how he went and checked. He tells him how he went and checked the Manhattan Center and couldn't find anything. And we did everything we could, and it was like we should have called sooner. Once we found out, and we're kind of like, we literally realized this, at the 0 hour. Probably could have given a little bit of a more heads up once I realized it was a problem, but I tried to fix the problem before I made it other people's problems. So go through the rest of the TV taping, and by this point, it's a locker room. Everyone has heard about, even though there wasn't a lot of people in the building when it happened, everyone else had heard about what happened with me and Jim by the end of the night. And thought it was, whatever. People had their opinions about everything. It was shit, and over fucking ring skirt and whatnot. So skip ahead to, so that was the first, and we were only there for one day. We did 1 day of TV tapings there, and so come back. I think that was an Andro van, not the full ring, because they already have a ring there. We didn't need to bring a ring. So drive back, and there's the Sunday. Go back into the office on Monday. And essentially told before I find out officially that Joe has it in for me now. This is a paraphrasing, but I'm going to take what he loves away from him, meaning wrestling. Okay. So I end up on a phone call with Joe, and he informs me that I'm no longer going to be the head of ring crew, and that if I choose to go on the road, it will come out of my 40 hours a week. Now, as anyone who has ever experienced a double shot weekend, I could put in more than 40 hours in 2 days. So that would also mean I would not be getting paid overtime. I was allotted 40 hours, and what I chose to do with it was my choice. So it was essentially, I can go on the road and not get paid for the entire time I'm on the road, or I can, which would also screw the office over, because then there's nobody there necessarily to do the phone answering and shipping and website article writing and all the other things that I did in the office. And then also be away. Being away from my family without getting paid, without getting compensated for it for more than 40 hours. Just to put that in perspective, when you're driving the ring truck, the drive to and Chicago and back is 32 hours, and that's just going and coming back. So that's not counting while we're doing Dayton, having a night in Dayton, the time I put in at the show there, which at that point would have just been like working the merch table. That would not have been as an on-air talent, because
you weren't on air.
We don't have anything for you. I was never told that, but so that 40 hours would have been eaten up on driving, not even being at the show. So I would have worked, for free for a good portion. So it just
didn't make sense.
Lot didn't make dollars or cents. And there was that part of me in the back of my head as I'm being telling this, that reflected back on that North Carolina, South Carolina double shot weekend, where my overtime hours were almost 40 hours, in part because I had a breakdown of the truck, so I'm still on the clock for all this. I'm having to deal with a broke down ring truck, literally sleeping on a picnic table. Me, right leg. I don't remember so like two other people maybe just literally sleeping on a park bench at a rest stop, waiting for Penske Truck Services to come fix the truck for us. So it's reflecting on that, like wondering in the back of my head, if does this have anything to do with this? Because this seems like ridiculous response to a lost ring skirt. So I hear him out, and at the end of the conversation, I just say, "Are you aware of what happened with Jim?" And I can say I never signed any sort of non-disclosure agreement for anything that happened to me in Ring of Honor. So I have something I haven't talked about in too much detail. So then I explain the situation of what happened. I tell him there are plenty of witnesses. If you don't believe me, you can talk to witnesses. We're there for it. And I said, so I lose this, but what happens to Jim? And he's like, well, Jim's not an employee. He's an independent contractor. So I am an employee. Like, you're this independent contractor. This is from my perspective, how I looked at it. So this taking away any, I was obviously angry. I thought it was absolute bullshit. But just from the perspective, I was looking at it as, so this independent contractor is allowed to treat one of your employees this way and have no consequences, but your employee is suffering consequences. And okay, then I look at it as, all right, well, those are two, they're unrelated. Jim having a fucking temper tantrum baby fit and what had me getting released for a ring skirt from the crew are unrelated. But I was like, but still, you're gonna, this isn't right. And I get basically like, all right, well, I have to call you back and talk to HR or whatever. So I get it wasn't. I don't think it was the same day. I think the rest of the day went without anything. So a day or two later, so it would have been the Tuesday or the Wednesday after this, Joe calls, Human Resources is on the line, and Jim is on the line. And basically he's made to apologize to me. And I knew I knew this was as far as this thing was going to go. And as far as I even cared to push it. It was just, I wanted it known and on record that this happened. So that's what I got. I got an apology for his behavior, and Joe saying, is that acceptable to you? And I saying, yep, that's fine. And just getting off the phone. And I did not see Jim again. I don't know. It was a bit. So I saw Jim again after that. And then I had, looking for some support from other people and not getting it, being very disappointed in that fact. Thinking it'll just blow over from some people, and these are not the people directly. These are not my immediate coworkers in the office I'm referring to. It's just other people in power who had some say, some authority, or some stroke that I thought, and just it'll blow over. It'll be all right. You'll be back in there. You'll be back on the road. And I never was, except when I was needed for certain things, and these were being asked, can you come help me at the merch table? Do you want to come down and do one of the interviews that we would do for the comp DVDs? Stuff like that. That was the only times I was really back on the road. The only reason I even appeared in front of the crowd, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but in January at the Homecoming 2012 show was because Hero asked me to come. So we could just kind of put a cap on our story. It's the only reason I was there, and the fact that the Armory is like 15 minutes away from where I live. If he would have been like, "Can you come up to Boston to do this?" I would have been like, "Yeah, I'm good, kid." But that's the only reason I was at that show on camera, wearing my Stina's Right shirt underneath my leather jacket. Just, but
a little nod to what should have been.
What should have been. That's kind of the story of how I became a non-factor on the road anymore.
Well, there's some other factors around this time that we do want to talk about. November 9th, 2011. An email. And I have seen this email. So I know it exists. I guess talk a little bit about what was in that email and the significance that it had.
I mean, the significance.
As you're pulling it out.
I'm just looking. I forgot to pull it out right in front of me. I forgot to whip it out in front of you.
Hey now. I realize it's a video content, show now.
Yeah,
but
there's content in there that I'm not going to get into, and because as I said before, it's not just my story, but the gist of this email being almost laying out like, look, this person's completely disposable. We need to get rid of them. These people can be replaced. We don't want to lose these people we don't want to lose these people because me being one of them, because of what we had to offer, essentially, and they'll assuming that we'd be willing to, I would be willing to move to Baltimore, and this was an accidental. I clicked send to the wrong person is how this ended up with me, this person can be replaced. They'll suck losing them because of their history, because of their the history, but they can be replaced, and we can create our own history. And it was just the writing on the wall. I mean, it just kind of confirmed, the email just kind of confirmed everything that I was thinking and felt. But I don't know. Maybe it's the sticking with the devil I know, because at least I knew what to expect from them. And again, Ring of Honor was my heart and soul. They had that right as far as, and it was the writing on the wall, I guess, that email was, but it wasn't enough to make me go, okay, I need to go find something new. I need to find a new path to my life. And you figure this is still 2 years before I'm future endeavored. But it wasn't enough, and it's one of those things where it's like, in hindsight, it's like, yeah, if I had been a little bit more outside the bubble, but I'd been in that bubble for since November of 2003. I'd been in that bubble for 8 years at that point. It was all I knew, and I wasn't in any way wanting, in my heart, anything else but Ring of Honor. Even though it was literally on a piece of paper in front of me saying that I was completely fucking disposable. And it confirming the idea that obviously everything, because why wouldn't you? If you bought a company in that blue and white shirt there that was near that university, wouldn't you? Why would you want to still run that office when you could consolidate it into one office in Canton?
Right.
Like, why have two locations when you can put everything into one? It's just a matter of figuring out how they were going to do it, and that was a several-year process. This email just confirmed, everything that I thought was going to happen, and it just, I know it's text and it's letters on a keyboard on a screen, but you read tone into it.
It's your life. But
I could read. It's like I could feel the tone on this as just being a very, again, like, afterthought, disdainful. Like they're an unfortunate necessity of us doing business is that Bristol office, and that nothing ever changed that feeling or that treatment. Like nothing ever changed that treatment.
Well, one of the real most valuable people in Ring of Honor, somebody that we have talked lovingly about, we have busted his balls, even though he probably has no idea what a podcast actually is. And that's Sid Ike. And Sid, I guess, tell us a little bit about Sid, like kind of what his role was and what he did, and
everything. In some ways, I mean, he did a lot. I mean, Sid
he said the word pal a lot.
Pal a lot. If you ever bought a ticket at the door, he was the guy smiling at you. Like we always used to joke that him and Ernie had there were two guys, Ernie Osiris, who permanently smiled. They never weren't smiling. They were never not in like a smiling, good mood. He did a lot. Like he did a lot, and was a very vital piece of the puzzle, keeping us alive for as long as we were up to Sinclair. Because you had to, you have to have somebody who wasn't afraid to be a fucking heat magnet. And I'm sure a lot of people hated Sid, but it was his job to make sure that Cary's business was protected. And that means financially or personally or whatever. That was his job, and he was the one who was willing to take bullets, even if they weren't bullets that he deserved.
Yep. And I have nothing but nice things to say about Sid. Just in terms of, he loves sushi. Oh yeah, and Bluetooth. By the way, and I'll just tell this story real quick. Everybody knows that in 2007, 2008, and maybe even late 06, I got in on the iPhone craze. I was a big smartphone guy. I had a bunch of different smartphones over the years. You can blame that on Sid, because if there was a gadget, Sid had it. And with Sid, Sid turned me on to the concept of Bluetooth. And there's not a ton of things that Sid and I had talked about, because Sid's not a wrestling fan, but we always could talk gadgets and the latest gadgets, and he recommended a bunch of different Bluetooths to me over the years, and I bought every single solitary one of them. And I remember coming to a show in Dayton. Sid had a white Bluetooth that was almost like elastic wrapped around his ear. And I said, what possibly is this thing? And he said, it's Bluetooth earpiece. And, if you saw Sid at the door, he was always talking to what appeared to be himself, but it was actually his earpiece. And that Bluetooth was the very last one I bought, because it was such a quality product until I didn't need it anymore. I still have the Bluetooth. I don't know where it is. It's in my cell phone graveyard. But Sid Sid would recommend the Bluetooth, devices, and I would buy them. But Sid was the MVP, and Final Battle of 2011 was his final show, and it was a very unfortunate turn of events to have Sid leave the company. But
that was one that was totally expected. He was redundant. From a business perspective, he was redundant because they had Gary Juster, who was doing a lot of the same stuff as far as finding buildings and moving from. We had begun the process of moving from the paper tickets we were getting from Minuteman Press into doing everything through Ticketmaster or whatever other ticket sites. Which that was another huge headache, because then we were selling some tickets through our website, some tickets on Ticketmaster's website, and then there'd be doubling up on sales from one website to another, and just other headaches. I mean, I get that process. It was another way of trying to make us look like a more professional company selling through a real ticket company. But it was just another another headache. But yeah, so we knew that we made the joke. It is kind of funny with how everything would unfold after this, but it is something that is funny that Sid at least did get taken out to lunch and treated well when he was informed that he was getting let go.
Here's
he was
some
treated
sushi
very well,
and
they took him to the diner, and he had a nice meal out of it before he was when he was let go.
Sid is definitely missed, and maybe one day he'll come out of hiding and get social media and know how to use it and come on the show and join us.
But he did. He just like me got to go to the Homecoming 2012 show in Philly and say his goodbyes. He was allotted that, and I think that even took some convincing to get him to come do it. But it was important. I think it meant something to a lot of the guys that Sid took the time to come to the show and say goodbye, because nobody knew. People just kind of showed up at the building because that was the first show after Final Battle. We're like, where's Sid? And so I think it was an important thing that he got to do that, because he said there may have been a lot of people that that he drove insane, but I think a lot of people that also appreciated what he would do for them and how he would help them out.
Well, I'll say this about Sid. People, when you look at the history of Ring of Honor, you think of Cary Silkin, you think of Gabe Sapolsky, and then right after those two gentlemen, you think of Sid and Ross. And I think the level of contributions that both of those men made are underappreciated, and they deserve a ton of respect and admiration from longtime and new Ring of Honor fans. So we talked about Ross. And Ross Abrams is, like we said, an unsung hero of Ring of Honor's legacy. And in the remainder of 2012, you'd hit up some sporadic shows on the East Coast: Baltimore, New York City, Pittsburgh.
I remembered I went to Canada. I forgot I went to Canada in 2012.
Oh.
I got home from work. I mean, I'm jumping very much ahead because it was the end of the year. It was that I guess it would have been the Glory by Honor show with Kevin and Elgin, where we played What's in the Box at
It was over if it was in a box.
Yeah, true. I found the goddamn building. I'm forgetting the name of it. The International Center. Mm-hmm. And literally 2:00 in the morning, my brain decides to remind me that you need to wake up because you were in Toronto area in 2012. You took a flight with Ross and drove in the car with Jeff Jones and stopped at a rest stop and ran into the Briscoes on the way and got Tim Hortons, and we're very excited. That's what my brain decided to tell me at 2:00 in the morning. Yeah.
Well, I was
Thank you, brain.
I was trying to figure out how to use function keys on a Windows 10 computer, HP laptop at 2 a.m. this morning, and still have no answer. So,
yeah, my cat has her answers for you.
Just trying to do my job here.
Yeah, so I did. I went to sporadic shows over the course of 2012, mostly to do a lot of the sit down interviews. Like Elgin and the Briscoes. Nigel was I think 2011. Obviously the aforementioned in the archives, Kevin Steen, Hell Rising one. Eddie Edwards, Roddy and Jimmy Jacobs I did in Baltimore on the same day. God, who else did I do? Adam Cole was done in The Office, which that's actually Adam Cole interview is a good example of the disconnect between a wrestling office and a TV office. As a fan, a longtime fan of wrestling who has probably seen many a shoot interview in your day, it's a conversation. It is the idea, if you're a good interviewer, which not all are, is it's a conversation piece. Some people literally just read questions and they don't actually have a conversation. They're just question. Good ones are done as a conversation where you're actually responding and reacting to what your subject is saying back to you. Mm-hmm. I thought I did a good job. Pat myself in the back with this one. I thought I did a really good job as an interviewer with the guys. So we do the Adam Cole one in the office. The Eddie Edwards one is done right around the same time. They were done very close to one another because they were both in the hands of Mark Davis, maybe Chris Resnick. I'm not entirely sure who would have been the one that did the actual editing for it at that point, or if it was Mark Brown yet. And he turned into this huge argument of it's not about the interviewer. It's not, you're not there to, because they understand wrestling terms, not there to get yourself over, for the, it's not the interviewer. It's about the subject. So they're going to do, if you have seen the Adam Cole Panama's Finest DVD, you'd never know it was done as an interview by me because they chose to put the questions as like a text block screen, and then it was Adam Cole's answer. Text block screen, Adam Cole's answer, which made it, to me, brutal to even attempt to watch. So the counterbalance was, all right, well, we'll do one our way. And this was why this was an argument. And this is an example of not listening and not remotely even attempting to have a conversation with the people who have been doing this for years. I mean, as far back as RF Video with Ring of Honor, RF Video was built on shoot interviews and 17th generation bootleg copies of other people's shows. And we continued the shoot interview concept with the Straight Shooting series and the Secrets of the Rings. And we had plenty of experience doing this and knowing what worked in that realm. Even watch an interview on TV from like an ESPN interview, they don't do that. It's an actual conversation between the host and the athlete. So why that they thought this was a good idea, I have no idea. To this day, I have no idea. Someone actually brought it up to me the other day. Maybe it was Josh Gavin, I think, who brought up the Adam Cole one to me the other day, messaged me and saying it was one of his favorites. And I said, yeah, I loved the interview, but they ruined it. So they're like, we'll try one our way and one your way. Adam Cole one was done their way. Eddie Edwards one was done the way it should be done, the traditional way of doing an interview, the conversation piece interview. So it's reactionary, and it's not just talking head, static shot, talking head, And I think that after they both got done, the ultimate decision was, I don't think anyone ever said, you're right. I never said, I told you so. But I think it was understood by the fact that every one of them, Adam Cole was the only one that was done that way out of all the ones I did. And the last one I did was the BJ and Jimmy interview, whatever they called that.
The
decade in the making. I did it twice. That's another story. that's a 2013 event. The last one of those I did was the Jimmy and BJ one that we filmed at Death Before Dishonor 12 or whatever it was, the night Adam Cole won the belt in Philly.
11.
11?
11.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, the night Adam Cole won the belt in Philly. So, there was a reason why only one of those, the Adam Cole one, was done that fashion, because they realized they were wrong in that. But it was just a good example to me of the disconnect of understanding wrestling and TV, traditional TV.
And not to take their side in this at all, but I understand the idea of wanting to try something new or giving an effort into trying a new format, but once you realize that it falls flat, that's on you, and you need to make up for that.
No, it wasn't even a trying something new. It was just like, this is how we're doing it. I remember when we saw the rough cut of it or whatever before it got sent to the to disc makers who did our replication, and seeing it like that, and we're like, what is this? And yeah, it was not did not work at all.
It went from a shoot interview to a monologue.
Yeah, just a talking head with little bumpers in between, and yeah, that was. I mean, there were. That's just one example that jumps out immediately to me. But there were so many examples along the way of just that disconnect between trying to figure out what, you know, excuse me, a TV company trying to figure out how to do wrestling. Now, it kind of made me wonder, like, is this the experiences? Man, I know it was a far. It's nowhere near the same in terms of the level of spotlight or prominence, but the closest comparison I have is that WCW was owned by a television company.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's one of the reasons why anytime anyone deems to refer to Ring of Honor as an indie, I'm like, they're owned by a TV company. Did you call WCW an indie? No. Ring of Honor is not an independent company.
Not anymore, they're not.
No. And they haven't been since June of 2011. So you're owned by a TV company. You're not an indie. You're not being run out of someone's pocket. You're not an indie. And I think obviously, you know, I can say based on, you know, what we saw based on what I see on screen in All Star Extravaganza that we just did. I think they finally, you know, lots of growing pains, and I was in the middle of those growing pains, and it was a very I think it became a very combative environment because, you know, you had one side pushing on you that they knew how to do things, even though they had literally no experience, and at the same time, us in just like begging to be heard and listened to. You know, things like, I think it can be argued that the company exists on the shoulders of the New Japan talent and the elite, which is from New Japan and the Bullet Club. We tried to emphasize back then, reestablishing the relationship with Pro Wrestling Noah. You know, at the time, New Japan hadn't came back and blown up yet. You know. Mm-hmm. In 2011, 2012. So it was like, okay, well, we can reestablish this relationship. And it was just like, no. Because I think especially in those early years, it was all about spending the least amount of money as possible. You don't see production upgrades in those first couple years of Sinclair Ring of Honor. You don't see the set design. You know, it was a slow process. Eventually, it kind of developed, and it was exclusively for TV taped in Baltimore, because they kind of treated the Do Burns the way we treated the arena. They didn't give away free tickets, but I mean, they always seemed to run their TV there.
Yep.
And I was there for a couple of them. And it was those growing pains, and it just, for better or worse, you know, I was stuck in the middle of them, and, you know, fighting to be heard and listened to and communicated with. And it just kind of felt like, as I've said several times over, no, you guys just stay off in your corner and mail your DVDs and do what we say. And if I think that was one of the reasons that made it so combative, is that, you know, we had spent the better part of the last decade having a voice. You know, you go from having a voice and having the ability to communicate your thoughts and feelings on a book, not book, but like the way things are being done, or, you know, like, you know, I was very involved at one point in kind of like the event booking, in the regards of like, okay, think of what you're doing to your crew. Like, okay, for example, Boston and Edison, the Boston University building and the Inman Sports Center are the two worst fucking buildings you could pair to each other for the crew, because they were two buildings that we just would be there forever. For absolute ever. The setup, the teardown, everything about it. Like, putting them together was a nightmare for us, and it was the kind of shit that was demoralizing and made people not want to do it, and cost me crew in some regard sometimes. So it was like, all right, well, I'm pushing myself into this to help kind of mitigate, and like, all right, well, think about what you're doing to the people you're depending on, as far as how you're structuring buildings and what buildings you're pairing together. But we had that open line of communication, you know, in the office. That didn't exist anymore. So you go from having a voice to having duct tape over your mouth. And and it made for such a I keep saying competitive environment, and that's not a pleasant way to work. And it was like that in so many fashions. I mean, trying to communicate problems we would have with a website, and part of the problem is, like I said before, a webmaster was in another country, and just failing now, and sometimes a reluctance to admit that things were wrong. When having inventory issues because somebody orders one DVD, but it's taking two or three out of the inventory, and then wondering why the inventory numbers aren't wrong and looking to blame us. You know, it's like, no, the system's not working, and we've told you this repeatedly, and nothing's fixed it. The system's fine. Okay. So there was lots of frustrations in working out these bugs because it felt, on my end at least, that I'm telling you the problems that I have, and you're telling me they're not problems. I'm like, okay, I don't know. I don't know what to do. And I think that was one of many problems where the unwillingness to just sit back and say and just not say anything or not do anything. It was that we all want this to be better. That's ultimately what it was. Is we all wanted it to be better, and we all wanted it to work. And I just think it wasn't going to happen because they wanted to make things their way. They owned the company. They had that right. And we didn't fit in that picture from day one. We didn't fit in that picture. As I said, from day one, I didn't feel safe or trust or
you
any of that.
You didn't feel like you were part of the team, I guess.
No. We were the ancillary pieces that were necessary to make the machine run until they could find a way to remove us and put new cogs in the machine.
Boy, it sounds eerily familiar. Just replace wrestling company with law office.
And it wasn't just office things. It was just there were other things along the way too. That was just whether it was booking decisions or talent things or just having a voice isn't always having a voice and insisting on that voice isn't always a good thing for the wrestling world. And I guess for the corporate world either,
well, you're taking a square peg in a round hole. The wrestling world and the corporate world, they don't necessarily mix.
Yeah,
99.999% of the time.
Mm-hmm. Until you have to turn the company into something different, and that's what the last 5-6 years have been. It's just transforming what Ring of Honor was into something else. Because of what it is now. It's a part of a massive corporation. It's one arm of a corporation. And
it's functioning along with the rest of the corporate body in one fluid motion now.
Yeah.
So I guess we would kind of move on to October. Killer Instinct, when Ring of Honor killed New Jersey. That's going to be an episode unto its own right, I think, at some point. But our guy Bird, who I got to spend some time with over a week ago in Columbus, Bird is a legend. I'm not blowing smoke up his ass, but he has earned the right to be called a legend in the ring crew industry for many reasons. And you filled in for him driving the truck.
Yeah, it was the first time I had anything to do with the crew since that Louisville show. I was asked to drive the truck because he was unavailable that weekend for some reason, and I didn't do anything but drive the truck that weekend, but it was just kind of like that weird experience. And thank God it was Jersey, and it was Rahway. It was our first time running the Rahway building where Jersey All Pro had run, where I saw Jersey All Pro show in June of 2004. Yep. And it was our first time doing it, and Jersey All Pro generally would draw very well there, and we drew fuck all nothing. It was for what we should have. And it was this show is notable for being the last on screen for Jim Cornette. This was kind of when the fan backlash got vocal enough that they removed him from creative publicly. You know, as I said before when I've talked about it with both Adam and Jim and Hunter and Jim, I don't know what the delineation was for any of it as far as like who did what, who booked what, if it was, you know, one's an idea man or actually like more hands-on. But whatever the case may be, Jim was publicly removed from being head of creative or whatever silly title.
Executive producer.
Well, that was the TV title. I mean, whatever actual title they had from as far as like from a creative standpoint. This was after Lethal threw him over the table and in the backstage area.
And then he died.
And then he died like a week later when he exploded in Pittsburgh and threatened to kill Greg Gilliland, if I recall the stories I heard correctly. So, you know, do it to Greg, get fired, do it to me. That was supposed to be a joke, by the way. It's not. The thing I remember about the show is that was actually a show where I probably had more interaction with him that day than I ever did at any time because I wasn't around.
Him being Jim?
Jim, yeah. The shows I would go to, it was pretty much just like hi, bye. Like, you know, there was no maybe the traditional handshake at best. But this was one of the few shows I think I had any actual conversation with him because I remember walking around the lobby of the building and seeing all these flyers and posters for every other event that was happening at that building for like the rest of the year into 2013. And what do you think the one thing that was missing was?
The Ring of Honor event that night?
Absolutely no, not even on their calendar, because they had like a calendar for the entire month of October of all their events, and we weren't even on there. And I remember Jim getting super pissed off about that, and understandably so. And I think he was hot at Gary for that one. Gary, which
shout out Gary Jester.
It is what we used to do at the office. We'd walk around going, Gary, where are you?
And if you don't know that reference, Gary!
One's for you, Eric.
Yeah. If you don't know that reference, it's a Howard Stern reference. And Richard Simmons, wherever he is. Well, really, it's Sour Shoes doing Richard Simmons.
Yeah.
Referring to Gary Delabate. Hello.
I remember, you know, Cornette being quite pissed off, and I'm sure you can imagine that verbal where the fuck are the flyers? What the fuck? Every fucking event here has got a goddamn poster. Where the fuck are our posters, Gary? That sort of thing. I don't know if that was Gary's responsibility at all, but for some reason I feel like Gary was the one who Jim was mad at because he was, you know, Gary at that point had become like kind of the one in charge of event planning and booking buildings and stuff like that. And
so if I know it
made us wonder if like this. I remember it made me wonder if this lack of advertising at this venue was purposeful. You know, because I know there was definitely a push to have us run a lot of, and understandably so, you know, trying to build around the TV markets, which I think is a lot of what they do now. They run a lot of their shows in the TV markets, which is why they're randomly going to Texas like 3 times in a year, as opposed to never like we used to do, or you know, running three different places in Ohio. I mean, that was one of the things too, and I guess, you know, at the time it didn't make sense because, you know, 2011, 2012, and we mentioned it before, Ohio was one of the most financially depressed areas of this country, and particularly Columbus, Dayton,
Toledo,
and I was gonna say, and like and
Cleveland.
And we were running shows in all of these markets because Sinclair had TV in all these markets, and we were drawing shit. And it's like, well, there's no money there. But on the other hand, I can see with a little bit of distance that, all right, well, we're trying to, these are the markets where their TV is. So they can advertise on these TV shows, come watch us, And, but it was just like, I think we did, it was in that transitional period, I think we shit on a lot of our home, like the markets we had built up over the years, because now it was time to favor the TV markets. And so that made me wonder if that was, back then I wondered if that, was there a little, was this a sabotage thing, not advertising this Rahway show at all? I mean, this is just me. This is just me, like,
So
guessing at the time, like, why aren't there posters here? Why didn't we advertise this show locally? Like, why we don't have TV here? Why aren't we advertising even at the fucking building?
we slightly addressed this in the Monster Mac episode that will drop next week. But one of the reasons I brought up the question about the rivalry between Jersey All Pro and Ring of Honor, and from a promotions standpoint, this was Jersey All Pro's home building. And I remember there being a pretty large revolt of the Jersey All Pro fans. Like, their core audience in Jersey, they would draw a good number.
Mm-hmm.
1,000 people, somewhere in that vicinity for once a month or once every other month. There was a pretty good revolt that Ring of Honor was coming to their building, their house. And I wonder if there was a poster or anything like that, if it didn't get taken down.
But we weren't even on their event calendar.
Yeah, and that
has nothing
that's kind
to do
of
with the building.
That's kind of the thing.
We were on. There was not one piece of literature on anything that had any mention of our show being
Could this have been a last minute change from Inman over to Rahway?
No. Inman we hadn't run Inman in a couple of years at this point. We hadn't been to Jersey in a while.
Okay.
So I'm
just trying to think.
This was like the attempted
just, like, logical.
But yeah, we just there was no logical explanation for why there wasn't some sort of at least in-house advertising, on something there should have been there.
So New Jersey is a complete flop for the month of October.
Yeah. The only thing they said, the most notable thing for that was the day that Cornette was written off TV, and then I think it was a couple weeks later that he was written out of ring, that he got himself fired. Which for that I just remember being told Jim quit or Jim got fired, and kind of just being told what happened. I know it was at the Ross Raver in Pittsburgh, and it started as like a freak out about the building, and I don't know. My wild speculation has always been that he just had enough and wanted to find a way to find his out, and that was his out.
So during all this time, you're at shows, are you interacting with the Sinclair office people at all, or is it just very much
here, a little bit here and there? Yeah. I think Joe tried to slide into the Cary role,
I would 100%
being
agree.
the guy to be at the door and greet people and be the friendly face that people saw. He's not as personable as Cary at all. Cary very much has that, like,
Cary feels like he's the common man.
Well, I was gonna say he almost feels like that, that family member that you see. You're not, anytime you get to see him, it's it's in a similar way to a wrestling locker room, I guess. That anytime you see him, it's like it has, whether it's been 6 months or 6 days. It's always he's very, like, warm.
Everybody has
weird.
Everybody has a favorite uncle. And that's kind of what Cary was. My Uncle Bill's my favorite uncle of my uncles, and I always got along best with him and enjoy spending as much time as I can with him. And he always treats me like an equal, doesn't treat me like I'm some sort of bottom feeder like a couple of my other relatives do. And that's a direct shot and a well-deserved one. Cary always treats you like he's excited to see you as opposed to you being excited to see him.
For Cary, I felt that was natural. For Joe, I felt it was it took effort
Mm-hmm.
to be that. And Greg's presence around there was kind of just how do we do today? Numbers, merchandise, cash, money, walking around like he's at the I don't know him at all now, but at the time it was certainly walking around like he was full of himself. High horse sort of shit. Arrogant. He was very arrogant for someone who hadn't done anything. He was very young in his position. He was basically like, all right, here, you're in charge of this, like directly. And very young and very arrogant. I've been told that he's much better disposition now. But it was bad enough that he was gone for a bit from the company, as far at least publicly, and we didn't interact with him a whole hell of a lot on the Bristol office end. And then, I mean, Gary, for the most part, I never had any issues with. I think the only issue I had with Gary ever was that first TV taping in Chicago, basically being told like last minute that we had to be out there a day early, and being like, say we had to be there on Thursday, and I'm being told this on Tuesday, and just being like, are you fucking kidding me? Just make it work. Just make it happen. You got to make it happen. Make it work. Okay, well, I might show up out there with a ring crew of 3 people. So, I mean, luckily everybody was able to pull it together like we almost always did and get out there. But it's the only time I can ever remember me personally having an issue with Gary was just that sort of, and I imagine too, it was kind of dumped on him last minute.
Sure. Yeah, because that's not his department, really.
No. And then who else? I mean, Jeff. Boy, I bust Jeff Jones' balls a lot by calling him Jeff Jones from ECW and whatnot. But I always had a decent relationship with Jeff Jones once he came in, and I think towards the end of 2011. And he did a lot of, he kind of took on a lot of the social media. We didn't really do it that much. We would have our Facebook stuff, but it didn't really become a thing for us until Jeff came in. And he really took over the social media aspect of the company, aside from YouTube, which Eric Santa Maria really did a lot of until he was let go in 2012. And who else? Dan Bynum was always cool. The production guy who had
Director.
He'd been everywhere. He I think he now works for MLW, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And he was always a super cool guy. I always liked Dan. And then there were people who just never clicked. Like Mark Brown, I think was one of the not Mark Brown, Mark Davis. I mean, was one of the ones who just never. I don't know. I always felt like he was an asshole. Like never, and then there were just like the randoms that. I'm just thinking of the ones that were constant or consistent presences. It's. It was. I said there were some that were very friendly and welcoming, some that were tried, and some that just were like, nope. I'm gonna walk around like I'm your boss and you're not. And then there's some people that just they changed when they were they changed under the new regime from what they were. And like I said, with Jim in that position, but until he was gone, it was always I think the lesson I've learned over the years between my own personal interactions and what I observe with everyone else, a lot of times if you don't agree, then you're wrong and you're an asshole. So anytime there was a disagreement over the way things were done, or things that were rather antithetical to Ring of Honor, or at least the vision of what the people who'd been around from the beginning had tried to build. If we disagreed with it, we were insulted and discarded and whatnot. But I think that's something I've seen in the larger scale, from my little bubble of Ring of Honor wrestling into the larger wrestling bubble. That's a lot of what I see when it comes to him. Uh, and I think then you had Hunter, once he was on his own theoretically, um, tried trying to steer the ship again. It's almost kind of like what happened with when Adam got fired. And Hunter trying to steer it back to Ring of Honor, what the heart of Ring of Honor was, and he'd been around long enough to know what that heart was, and I think that's again what it was trying to do. Post Jim.
And they've found ways to kind of mix in the elements of the new style of Ring of Honor and the old style of Ring of Honor, just as recent as Survival of the Fittest. There were moments where it felt like an old school Ring of Honor show.
And
but
it's a different. I mean, I remember going to the TV tapings. I went to I think the ones I went to in Baltimore were when they did Survival of the Fittest as TV. And I think might have been the episodes of TV where Steen defended the belt against Rhett. And just it's such the Ring of Honor product as it was built, and we've mentioned this before, was not meant for TV.
No.
At all. It had to change. And I do think what I witnessed of the Sinclair TV as they got more into it and away from they found a way to do it, as opposed to the HDNet TV that was just let's have three. It was super. HDNet TV was a glorified version of Superstars or USA Wrestling or American Wrestling. It was here's a one main event and 3 squash matches. Mm-hmm. I think they found a better way to make the TV as they've gone on. Definitely better than HDNet as a whole product to capture like the essence, to try and capture what the essence of Ring of Honor is for TV, and it looks really fucking pretty now.
Yeah, it does.
It did even then. Even like remember the first time I went to the Dewburns to watch the TV taping and seeing like they're finally, it was very slow. It took a long time, but they're slowly dribbling in money into the product. And I guess from a corporate perspective, it's like you have to see that there's something worth investing in. I don't think the corporate parent's just going to throw money at you because you want to make a new set. You're going to have to prove it, I guess, or get rid of everything that costs money in Bristol to now make room for that in the budget. Which I would be surprised. I'm sure that was one of the reasons why another one of the reasons why it ultimately came to an end in Bristol is because make room in the budget and consolidate.
Well, as the budget shrunk even more in Bristol, in December of 2012, Eric Santa Maria was terminated from services.
Yeah, that was I forgot to ask Eric exactly how, and I don't remember. I think it was just done on a phone call in the office, but man, it was like 4 days before Christmas. Like that's cold-blooded.
Yeah.
That was one of the takeaways I got from that one. That was just cold-blooded. I don't really. There's not much more to say about that than that. And I mean, and Eric was someone who was always like trying to like push for more, but it was just they had hired people. They had people down there, Chris Resnick, Mark Brown, like people to do the job. But I think it was maybe not 4 days, but it was like the 18th, 17th of December. So you're like, all right, it's almost Christmas. You're fired.
In the notes, you have it as the 19th.
Okay.
So it's 3 days after Final Battle.
Yeah, 6 days. Yep, you did 6 days before Christmas. Yep.
Which you were at Final Battle taping.
Yeah.
And helping out.
Yeah, I ran the merch table. I don't remember what interviews I taped that weekend, but no, that's when I found out that Generico was gone, and it's like I haven't seen you in forever, and I'm not going to see you again for a very long time.
And then he talked your ear off for 17 hours and danced around, didn't stop moving for the rest of the night.
No, that's also Nathan. Oh,
Oh.
yeah. Well, so hey, Generico and a 4-year-old. In terms of energy levels, yeah. um,
And nothing has
yeah.
changed either. That's the best part.
And then and then I was like, New York was probably the main building I would go to because then I was back there for WrestleMania weekend and your fucking Duke hat
That's right.
to record this. That's when I did the Steen interview and when I did the
If we weren't taping this part of the shoot interview today at the bright hour of 9 a.m. roughly,
yeah.
I would have had full Duke costume on today.
Yeah.
Seeing as
Today is day one.
yes, today is our opening game against the
Mm-hmm.
University of Kentucky, home of the most cheating college basketball program in all the world. And they'd like to sue me for stating that. I'd love to see the evidence in court that they don't cheat and pay their players to come there. Why would anybody go to school there? Shout out to my buddy Rocco, who was a quarterback at Kentucky. But at the end of 2012, so I guess we should probably wrap up 2012 here, and then we'll get into 2013. But at the end of 2012, here's where we're at, as both you and Ring of Honor. Ring of Honor has now been owned by Sinclair for over a year. They have started purging the roster. They've changed a lot of the talent. There's a lot of different staff members helping out on the shows. You and Ross Abrams are the final two guys from the OG office in Bristol. And I think that's not only a testament to you and Ross and what you meant to the product that you stayed around this long after a corporate takeover, but it's also a sign of, okay, these are the two guys that we feel best represent what Ring of Honor was, and now we're going to make Ring of Honor what we want it to be in 2013. We don't have Jim Cornette to tell us what to do. Delirious is the booker, Hunter Johnson, and now we are officially we're off, and we know what this year is going to be. This year is the end. Did you have any bit of optimism that 2013 was going to go well?
No. I mean, they just fired one of my friends 6 days before Christmas. I mean, they couldn't even let him finish out the year. That's kind of the where I was sitting from perspective at that point. It was always literally like you're sitting with your head at the bottom of the guillotine, wondering when the blade's gonna drop.
And that's no way to live.
It wasn't a way to live, and I was probably a miserable shit in life outside of it. And it did. I know it sucked a lot of the life out of me because at that point, and even just like me personally, it's like, all right, well, I now have my weekends free. I'm not on the road. I can wrestle like I wanted to wrestle. Like, but I had no motivation or desire because that Ring of Honor was all that became my wrestling, Like there was no wrestling outside of Ring of Honor after a certain point. I didn't want to wrestle anywhere else. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to work for anyone else besides Ring of Honor. I kind of built it up to myself over the towards that entire time. I think I just kind of built it up into myself that when my time with Ring of Honor is ended by Sinclair, I am done with wrestling. Shane Hagadorn's done. There will be no more, it's only going to be Chris. There's no more Shane Hagadorn.
I think you hit on something really important that I want to bring up and interrupt you with, is that there's Ring of Honor and then there's wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not only something that somebody that worked for the company felt, that's something fans felt.
Yeah.
That's how emotionally connected you were, or the fans were with Ring of Honor, our Ring of Honor. It was something we shared with the wrestlers. And that's not something you see anywhere else
Well,
in wrestling.
I think you can liken it to ECW.
Yeah,
In
that's the
that
closest thing.
you know, you kind of you watch old ECW tapes from the arena and you'll see these certain fans that are at every fucking show in the same seats all the time. Where did they go after January of 2001? Some of them showed up at some of the early Ring of Honor shows, but they didn't stay.
Oh,
That was the
they didn't go to CZW.
no, that was their wrestling. And when that ended, maybe they went on and just watched WWE programming. I don't know, but they didn't they weren't going to wrestling because it was, you know, near their house. They weren't going to the arena because it was convenient. That was ECW was their wrestling. So that's the closest, I guess, comparison I could make to it is that Ring of Honor for many people was their wrestling as a fan. And for me as a wrestler, manager, employee, I mean, as I knew it was getting, as I had that feeling of getting closer to the end, I did, you know, start sending out like resumes to Stanford, um, and just kind of like general resumes, never applying for like a specific job, but just general like resumes to Stanford. And I even looked half-heartedly to see if TNA had like job postings on their website because I felt like I had more to offer applying from an office standpoint than as a talent standpoint. But it's not something I ever pushed because my heart, as far as wrestling, was Ring of Honor. It's Ring of Hagadorn.
Yo, it's Ring of Homicide. This is where you just do the homicide voice, but as yourself.
Yo, it's the Ring of Hagadorn. It's the Ring of Homicide, Ring of Hero. I even called it the Ring of Claudio once.
The ROC? Oh,
I don't know my
there you
JC.
go.
I don't know my JC
Oh,
well enough.
I
Sorry. I was
put it
like,
on a
oh, I
T.
know. I don't even know my
Ah,
JC well enough to be like, oh, if it was like Dre or Snoop or Eminem or like, uh, now Jay Z is not my forte as far as just knowing lyrics off the top of my head.
the goat of modern day rap music.
Yeah.
It's not even close. But in 2013, you did do the BJ Whitmer, Jimmy Jacobs shoot interview, the second go around.
Well, I did that in two parts. The first, that was, I mean, God, was that? I'm trying to think. Did I do anything?
Because that was it. The final part
No.
of that was
Well, it was in
at the Ring
Philly.
of Honor in Philly.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to think in terms of the timeline. It's just like, all right, 2013, Greg was gone and then slowly came back. Never left Sinclair, but just he was not in the same position
They assigned.
and then moved to something else and then came back because the other guy was just a total worthless shit as far as doing his job. I mean, they started doing the DVD production exclusively down there. For the longest time, Eric was just putting together the comps in Bristol and Video Wire or whatever, and then everything moved exclusively to being done in Baltimore. Literally, the only thing being done in Bristol was the merchandise shipping. There was the ring was in there for the school, but we weren't officially allowed to have a wrestling school. They were doing the training seminars up there, but there was not officially allowed to be a school for whatever insurance purposes, legalities, yada yada yada. I'm sure it's complications that probably arise from, you know, a company being based out of Baltimore and having a satellite office in Bristol, in Pennsylvania. There's also issues with that when it came to like the trucks and easy passes and things like that. So I did the April show where I did, you know, the interviews that weekend and that WrestleMania weekend, which was Supercard of Honor something, and Kevin lost the belt to Jay Briscoe. And that was a big thing, like getting the belt onto Jay.
That was the day before you did the Hell Rising interview with Kevin.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and the Hell Rising
available in the archives.
Yeah, if you want to hear that story, that's all in the archives. I don't need to repeat it here. Suffice to say that DVD was a heat magnet. Then there was man, I don't think I went to. I don't remember going to anything else because I can't remember specifically when I filmed everything. You know. I think the next time I did go to a show may have been that Rostraver show. The first time I saw Dalton Castle and attempted to film the first version of the BJ and Jimmy shoot, which would have been god fucking awful. Adam Cole one was bad from production standpoint. This one would have just been fucking terrible because at the time, BJ and Jimmy had not yet formed the Decade. They weren't doing anything with each other at this point, but Hunter didn't want them to be doing an interview together. Like, really, it's fucking 2013. Like, really?
Yeah.
It's from really. If we gave a fuck about kayfabe, we wouldn't be doing these interviews in the first place. Period.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's a story. It happens, you know, and that for the hour or 2 or 3 that it's on your TV or on your YouTube video or whatever. Interviews, fine. I didn't get it, but I'm like, all right, well, this is one of those. All right, we'll try it your way. So, now we're starting to do production upgrades and kind of these interviews too. You can see it in like the Steen one and some of the other ones. A lot of the other ones shot in New York where it was easier to do it. A little more lighting, like Mark Brown would help like set up lighting and different. You know, this is one of the reasons. Like Mark Brown, I was always was one of the good ones who was helpful and made it easy. And he was a wrestling guy and knew the company and I'd worked for him or with him. It like I can't remember the name of the company. Like these random couple indie shows in West Virginia, at a roller skating rink, and so a prior relationship. And he would come in and set up the lighting with the light flashes and give it a little color, a little depth, just kind of make them look prettier. And so we set all this up in the locker room in Pittsburgh and we start recording. And then it's like, stop, Hunter, and gets us to stop. And, I don't think they should be in the interview. Yeah. It's like, I don't think they should be in the interview together. Can we film is there somewhere we can do it where, they're together, but not together? Like, all right. Put my fucking thinking cap for this one. So, mic up BJ, mic up Jimmy. They're sitting next to each other, but they're not allowed to interact. So it's very similar to how the Adam Cole one got presented because we're talking to both of them. But essentially the way I think it would have come off is I would have asked, hey, BJ, let's talk about the first time you and Jimmy really got together and started working together, or let's talk about how this rivalry between you guys carried over into IWA Mid-South, because this interview, the fuck else you gonna hear about IWA Mid-South talked about on a Ring of Honor DVD, this interview. And so then BJ would have answered the question, then it would have been cut, dissolve, fade to Jimmy answering the question. That would have been the entire 2.5 hours of the interview would have been like that. So we tried it and we did it for like 20 minutes, maybe a half hour. And all of us were just like, this is fucking awful. This is stupid. This sucks. This is awful. Like, no, not going to happen. But we had spent so much time getting this shit together and trying to figure out how to make it work that we had no time to film it 2-shot. Ultimately, I think I had 3 cameras. I had a 2-shot camera and then one filming Jimmy and one filming BJ. And then me mic'd and them mic'd. And that's how we ended up doing it at the Armory in Philly a couple months later. Because that was the next time it was possible for me to go to a show and do it. Because I wasn't going far unless I absolutely had to. I went to that Canada show because otherwise Ross would have been selling merchandise by himself at the International Center that day.
Hey, how much is this here compilation of a Kevin Steen?
$20.
What about the one of El Generico?
$20.
What about the one of Brian Danielson?
$20. They're all $20, and they're buy three get one free. So they're all $20. Buy three get one free.
So if I buy these three, do I get Manhattan Mayhem 6?
No,
Free?
because that wasn't out yet.
Well, whatever. Whenever the show was.
That came.
That's the conversations that took place at the merchandise table.
Now, even though there's giant fucking signs that say, and eventually, we got that stack that looked like we were at a rock concert that went up, which was a good idea. Just finding one that was exactly what we needed. But that was a good idea. Ultimately, that big rack, it was just a pain in the ass to transport. And keep the shirts nice and folded and clean and organized. But yeah, so then that Before Dishonor show in September would have been that was the last show I was ever at. That was the night of the tournament to fill the vacant title after Jay Briscoe got hurt. Adam Cole won the belt, turned heel. I filmed the real version of what do they call it again? A Decade in the Making.
Mm-hmm.
I like my name better. I called it Blood Brothers.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, I called it Blood Brothers. I thought that was a much better name than A Decade in the Making. But because The Decade in the Making really only, like, once it finally got released and I was told that, because it took a while. Like, I filmed this in September and I don't think it came out. It had a long turnaround time.
January, maybe?
Yeah, it was a lengthy turnaround time.
January, February, I want to say.
I guess, which means I'm guessing they held it off until The Decade was a thing, and then they gave that the name. The Blood Brothers name I thought was more timeless. The Decade in the Making thing kind of fixes it, as tied to that angle.
Yep.
Plus inaccurate by that point because they'd both been in Ring of Honor more than a decade. By the time the group even formed, they'd both been in Ring of Honor more than a decade. So
yeah. Not consistently, but combined.
They both debuted in 2003.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. BJ would have been in early 03, like in the Pittsburgh shows. Jimmy was Glory by Honor.
Something like that.
Something like that in September or October. And Roddy was right around the same time as well.
Yeah,
but
because Jimmy wrestled at Wrath of the Racket, so.
Oh yeah,
that was in August, so it was before that. But regardless, they'd both been around longer than a decade. That's whatever. I'm arguing semantics that have nothing to do with this conversation.
Yes.
Just
we
sidetracked. But so this is the last time. But here's another thing, and I mentioned this in something we talked about previously. That I remember sitting at that show and looking at the calendar and thinking, as they're planning the next Philly show and the tickets are going on sale for it. And this is one of those examples of like not having necessarily the history. So this is September of 2013 and they had the next Philly on sale as it was either February 15th or it was or 16th, or it was like the first weekend of March, and just looking at it and me thinking, we could run a show here on the anniversary, on the 12th anniversary of the company in Philly on that day, but they're running it. They think they ended up. I don't know where they did the 12th anniversary show that year. I think it ended up being in Baltimore. But like we could have ran with better, it was one of those moments where I was like, with better planning and like a line of communication, we could have been like, yo, we can run in Philly. It would have been a Sunday show that year, I think. But we could have been in Philly on the day of the anniversary, which, to me is important. I always thought we should run our anniversary shows. We didn't always, but to run our anniversary shows as close to February 23rd as possible.
Well, we've had this discussion. I think that the anniversary show should commence the 23rd of
no matter
February,
what, yeah.
no matter what.
But there's kind of an antiquated notion that slowly changes that wrestling shows had to be on a Friday or Saturday or a Sunday. I think they're doing better now. They run shows on Thursdays, and other companies run shows on Wednesdays, Thursdays, various days of the week. People need entertainment every day.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember being so disappointed. Like if there would have been some sort of communication, we could have made that happen. But at that point, there was no communication as far as event planning or anything like that. I think at that point, it was pretty much all a Gary thing, the event planning. And for all I know, the building could not have been available that day. It was just one of those things where I didn't know anything. It just, from at that point, I was really on the outside looking in. I think that Bristol was on the outside looking in.
Well, October, the week of Glory by Honor in Chicago. Ross was told to stay home.
Hold on. Now this I wrote my notes and realized that I'm wrong in my notes that I gave.
Okay, so I'll let you tell the story.
Essentially, then. It was being like, all right, nobody needs to go to this show from Bristol, and this all happened in the same week. Nobody, and this is in October. Nobody needs to go to the show from Bristol. Getting a phone call that literally everything happened in the same week. I thought it was a little more spaced out, just on talking and just kind of getting my finer points together after I, put together all my note sheet here. Everything happened kind of in the same week, which I, in my head, thought it was a little more spaced out. So yeah, the don't come to Chicago, and the the final acts falling all was in the same week.
So I guess tell us the story of what happened and
So say it was Thursday, maybe. I think it was a Thursday, Wednesday or Thursday of that week. Just in the office as usual. And very early get a phone call that just says, just wanted to give you guys a heads up that that Cough and other people are on their way up to the office. I don't know why, but they're on their way up to your office today. So immediately, I knew it was coming. So it was okay. Like, all right, let's gather my things. That's the best way I can describe it. Is like, what do I need off my computer? That's mine. That's not theirs, because I've been using this same computer for the last decade for the most part. It's like I have a lot of shit on there that's mine. So it's like, get everything off the computer that's mine. Whatever stuff around the office, like memorabilia and whatnot. Things I didn't take or the things I couldn't physically remove. There's still, as far as I know, because it is now the Worldwide Dojo office, is run by Berger and Sumi Sakai. If the futon is in there, that is Evan Starsmore's futon. That thing has been in rotation since 2014 or 2004 in that office. And my little refrigerator with all of my band stickers from college. That thing has been in circulation since 1997, and Bird has told me it is still in that office. So yeah, that's a good refrigerator. The last 21 years.
It's a great refrigerator.
Yeah, it's just a little mini fridge. It's perfect for the beer and leftover pizza in my dorm room. Obviously I couldn't pack those up and throw them in my car. So that's the first phone call. I don't know. And then that was the first phone call. And Then there was the second phone call from somebody else.
We'll leave his name out of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Saying, basically repeating the same information as the first phone call. But knowing that the second phone call was full of shit, as far as the not knowing why, because of the first phone call. Thank God for people who are friends, like genuine, real friends, who are willing to let you know what's up for real, as opposed to, I don't know, I guess in a way having to appease their corporate, this is your job. I get it. I can understand it. It's your job. Like, sometimes you have to do shit you don't want to do, or repeatedly do things you don't want to do because you make a good puppet.
Sometimes you got to eat shit before you can eat sushi,
and sometimes you have to let other people be. This is your job. This is what you have to do, whether you like it or not, I guess.
Yep.
I just the way that back then, the way I felt it was handled, then I just felt like I was being deceived by a friend. One friend who was being honest with me and telling me the truth, and the other one who was not there for me. So.
And you by no stretch of imagination, you don't think that second phone call was done with malpractice in mind?
No, the second phone call I think was done.
It was done to
I
make
can look
that
back
individual feel better.
Yes, that's what I was gonna say. It was a kind of a way of making the person feel better, and maybe like, all right, well, giving a heads up, but as much as they felt they safely could. It's like having to wear multiple hats. I said I felt that pain before, of being in the office, of being one of a member of the locker room. When you're wearing multiple hats, it can be, you're juggling and figuring out how to best wear them all. It's not easy. But in the moment, I didn't see any of that. I was just angry that I was, being lied to, is how I felt. Perspective, I know firsthand how that juggling multiple hats can be very difficult. But I never had anybody's livelihoods and careers kind of, that I was having to do it with, and being asked or told to do that,
Mm-hmm.
So Joe Koff and Greg, and this was the first time I'd seen Greg Gilliland in a while, which kind of asserted that he was back into, I guess, sliding back into a role. And then not Greg was there as well, if I recall correctly, and along with the army of putties. I don't know.
I shouldn't be laughing at this whole situation, but you just popped me there.
That's what I was going for. And I wish I could remember who. It's kind of a throwback reference I didn't even think about, whether it was Aries or Punk, who envisioned having like an army of putties.
That definitely sounds like a Punk thing.
I think it was Punk, having an army of putties.
Oh my god!
At his side. And so I'm, taken back from my office into one of the other offices, and sat down, and human resources was on the speakerphone, and I was asked some questions, and it's nothing I haven't talked about before on here now. Have you ever sold any Ring of Honor DVDs? I said, yeah, I've sold my own personal collection, stuff that I've pre-Sinclair. Yes. Did you ever sell the Kevin Steen Hell Rising DVD? I said I sold my personal copy, my copy of it. This is after the thing, and um, it all kind of it is. It's one of those moments where everything kind of just becomes a blur as far as like specific things that were said. Um, it just kind of became like this tunnel vision of me just basically being, of me being let go. And all I could think of was I have a kid on the way. Um, they didn't know that. I hadn't told, it wasn't any of their business at that point. And then being asked if there's anything I needed to get. It's weird how it's like everything, you see it in a movie, like almost like a scene in a movie where everything just kind of like drowns out around you. And I had that kind of a moment. Because it was just that flash of like everything that I have done since 2003 has been like slowly chipped away from me. Is kind of how I felt. First, and this was all right. So Chris and Claudio and Sarah are gone, and I try to continue myself in an on-screen role, and that's taken. That's there's nothing there for me. Then I'm taken off the road, and now I'm just gone, and it was surreal. It's weird. To me, it's weird just thinking back on how literally like everything just kind of everything around me just it's like this white noise. Like whatever words were said to me, anything, it's just kind of like a blur, and just sounds like sounds like the adults on the Peanuts cartoon in my memory. Like everything sounds like wah, 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 because all I'm hearing in my head is like, what am I gonna do now?
So we've had an Army of Putties reference in the adults in the Peanuts cartoons to describe your termination from your job.
Yeah. And
I wish I could view some of these things, Zach, as with this much sense of humor. I guess it is, a while afterwards,
and I guess that's what's important, like, to me to convey in this is I've been asked like why do you want to talk about this, and there's a lot of reasons. I'm long past the point of like bitterness or resentful or angry. um I mean, I held on to that for a while. And I'll talk a bit about that after this. But it's now to me, it's like, well, and I don't remotely say this to inflate. I don't know. You know me. I'm very self-deprecating, and I don't know. Am I humble? I don't really put myself
yes,
over too much or anything like that. But
yeah, you kind of just
there's nobody else who's going to tell the stories.
right.
And somebody like, why? I was like, well, you're not. Hey, why do you want to go back through this? I'm like, because emotionally, there's not. I don't. It's not there anymore. Like those emotions that were tied to this 5 years ago aren't there anymore. It's perspective and distance, and a lot of it happened to me. It happened with me, around me, to me. But I can talk about it as a historical fact as well. Like this is what happened from my perspective. This is part of the story of Ring of Honor. Um, this is just happens to be my story. Everything we talk about on the show, it's my perspective. Your perspective as a fan. The things we experienced as fans, as members of the office, as getting close to the wrestlers, as being one of the wrestlers, and I can talk about this part of it now. And I don't. If you would have asked me to do this shit 3 years ago, I would have told you to go fuck yourself. I couldn't have done it.
Probably word for word.
I couldn't have done it, and it takes time, and it was a wound that takes time to heal and be able to talk about. And now it's just like, okay, this is what happened,
Well,
and
36 plus episodes into this, we've talked about, and this is really like my pitch to you to do this show was therapy.
yeah, yeah, and it has been, and it's like, and it sucked. I mean, it fucking sucked 5 years ago, and then what happened afterwards made it suck even worse. But I can look at what's funny is the payoff to the Sinclair story is it made me laugh out loud because it was so ridiculous and epitomized so much of the relationship. Um, so that happens. I am kind of walked out of the building, and I'll freely admit I was very teary eyed and crying. Not like bawling, but like teary eyed and like it's that moment of having everything taken away from you. Um, I get in my car and I sit there and I just sat in my car and was like, I can't remember who it was, but I do remember there were people watching me, like waiting for me to actually pull out of the parking lot and leave. Um, and the first person I heard from was Cary. And then I didn't hear from him again for 5 years until we started doing this. Um, but as you know, I think he's that's there's reasons it's been
Mm-hmm.
talked about between personally that's between me and him and the things that have been talked about of why that didn't happen, and then randomly from Cabana, it's like what the fuck, but and I hadn't seen him in a year maybe, but he was another one of the ones that I heard from pretty quickly, and it was interesting to me and just kind of showed that there's still the bond,
The brotherhood.
and looking out, looking out, not Cabana to Hagadorn, but Scott to Chris, and then and this is one of the regrets I have is that there are the people that reached out that I didn't respond to, like Mike Johnson of all people actually reached out, and not looking for an interview, not looking for a story, not looking for a soundbite, nothing, just to see how I was, and I just didn't, I couldn't. Um,
Have you
no,
talked to Mike since?
I don't know. I don't think I have.
I wonder if that would be good for our show to have a conversation with Mike Johnson.
Yeah. Uh, but he did. He reached, and it was one of the people that I just didn't respond to, and I wish, and it's a regret because Mike is a good dude, really good dude, who was always a big supporter of Ring of Honor, and I remember busting his balls of, like, you hate me. I don't hate you.
I
I don't
got
hate
some
you at all.
scoops for you. You didn't
And
prank call him with any scoops, locker room scoops.
no, no, no. I was
I,
not one of those guys.
I'll
But so
I'll say this about Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson and I've met him a handful of times, maybe over
mhm,
the years. Every year on my birthday, he has wished me a happy birthday
yeah.
on Facebook, and he has no reason to. He's got
Hmm.
the 5,000 friends. I'm sure there's many people with October 15th birthdays, but he goes out of his way to wish me a happy birthday
Yeah.
and tell
He's
me, he's a good dude. Genuinely a good dude.
yeah, I completely agree. Like there is no reason that he needed to check in on me, but he did. And whether you listen to this thing, Mike, I don't know. You've never, but thank you. And thank you for doing that. Sorry I didn't respond. Just couldn't. Wasn't in a place where I could. But to wrap the Sinclair story, so they fought me on my unemployment. Um, they fought me. they got our first hearing date rescheduled. The second one got canceled because we had a blizzard. So show up for the third one. No one from Sinclair shows up, which means, they forfeit after dragging us out for 3 months. And so I sit down with the whatever, I don't know what the person's fucking title is.
It'd be a magistrate.
Magistrate, yes. And they're like, all right, well, nobody showed up, so I guess, whatever, you win. And so she shows me the paperwork of like what they were basing their fight on. And it's based on a wrestler's contract. And I looked, and I'm laughing about it. I think like I'm laughing right now. I just was like, this is fucking hysterical. But it so summed up the disconnect between corporate and wrestling.
Did the magistrate look at you and go, "You don't look like a wrestler to me"?
No. Thankfully, gotten that enough in my life. But I think it summed it up. Like they're and I like that. I just laughed. I was like, "This is fucking hysterical." That they're fighting me on something that doesn't even apply to me. Like I was an employee, not one of the independent. She's showing me like the wrestler independent like rules and contract. I'm like, none of this apply. I wasn't a wrestler. Like I was an actual employee of this company, and it kind of was like to me, especially looking back on it now, like a very funny payoff to the story because it was a perfect summation of the disconnect between Sinclair Broadcasting and Ring of Honor Wrestling.
And that's kind of the reason we did this. Obviously, we wanted your story.
Well, and I guess the end of my story is as I said, what I wanted to, what I always put in my head is I did. I put a bullet in the head of Shane Hagadorn for 3 years.
And then he made that fiery babyface
literally
comeback.
Immediately. There's nothing babyface about me, except maybe my actual gray-haired face. Because I don't look.
You're old.
You look older than I do. People can see this. Ha!
What? I gotta trim this beard. This is ridiculous. It feels disgusting.
I killed my Twitter. I killed my Facebook. I killed anything that was Shane Hagadorn. Like that day, I scorched earth my emails. I like memorabilia that I had here. I sold my shirts on eBay or just got rid of them. Like I purged so much of Ring of Honor from my life. And it's a regret I have because it's all, it and I even I kind of purged wrestling from my life for a bit. Like it was a while before I let myself really watch anything of any kind. And then I'd slowly kind of, it was really Kevin and Sami Zayn being in NXT that kind of pulled me back into to wrestling. It was before that.
Just for clarification purposes, you didn't know Sami Zayn before he debuted at NXT, correct?
I had no idea who Sami Zayn is.
Thank you.
But
brother.
It was it was before that, but it was in general. It was NXT is what kind of pulled me back into wrestling. But it wasn't until we watched that All-Star that I broke back. I crossed the Ring of Honor barrier for the first time. Because it's okay now, it's far enough away from me that I can do that. I didn't know if I'd be able to, even when we started doing this, what it would be like to dive back into it. And it's been fun. And I've enjoyed it and going back and watching the old shows. And as I said then, I kind of look forward to watching some more of the newer stuff and just seeing what it is, because I don't know, it's okay now. Where I'm looking for words. Hey, this is the best way I can put it. It's okay now. I'm okay with it. And I've since now found my way back into wrestling at the insistence of Alex Payne over and over and over and over and over again. And her place is like On Point Wrestling, and that was the first time I even went to a wrestling show. It was On Point show. Shit, it's 2.5 years ago at this point, maybe. And being harassed, because wrestling, as soon as you set foot in the locker room, it's like, so when you starting? What? No, I'm just visiting and hanging out and watching the show. Of course, like 2 shows later, it was at ringside with Alex and Pelly and
the whole gaggle of ROH
and I
Wrestling Academy graduates. Bobby
Dempsey. That's Pro Wrestling Explosion. That's for PWA.
Ernie,
that's
I'm
really,
just saying, like,
but that's kind of what started it. Is like, so I did the one PWE show, thinking it was just probably going to be a one-off, and I was like, fuck it, I've never got to manage Alex in any form, and he's my best friend in IRL, and like, fuck it, we never really have to do anything together. So if this might be a one-off and there might never be another show, so let's do it. So, and now it's turned into, we're creeping on the I guess this would be the creeping on the 2nd anniversary of the show, of the company, and I keep my fingers for some big stuff happening next year with it. Maybe even me getting into the ring again. I apologize to everybody. MLJ told me he'd kill me if I got in the ring again.
I just hope it's on a date that I can get on a plane and come to.
Hopefully.
See this.
So it's
sell some tickets for a live podcast afterwards.
I found my love for wrestling again,
and that's
and I almost lost it. I almost lost it completely, and I found it in little ways, both me doing it and me watching it and enjoying it. And I'm happy for that, because it's been a huge part of my life for as long as I can remember, and it's not something I ever want to lose. And and I hope my kid picks it up too. I guess I'll forgive him if he doesn't when he gets older, but
he will. There's a lot of you in him, from what I can tell, and he's gonna be full blown into the business. I can just see it already.
His choice, though, not mine. It'd be his choice.
Exactly. He's gonna be the first professional wrestler to have a Halloween gimmick.
Yeah, no shit. Well, I mean, unless you count D in his Michael Myers mask.
No, like, I think he's just gonna wear a different Halloween costume to the ring every time.
Interesting.
Yeah, he'll be a luchador. Not a lucha dinosaur like I saw over the weekend, but we'll talk about that one off air.
Okay.
But this whole journey, and that's what this is. This is you're going through life. You're growing up. You wanted to be a wrestler. You went to the wrestling school. You worked in the office. You managed. You literally did everything possible. I don't think you refereed at all.
No, that's probably the one thing I never did in front of the camera. We would in the training school.
Yeah.
But
not on camera.
One thing I never did.
And you never ring announced, so you never did Bobby Cruz.
No, I did do commentary.
You did commentary on Buffalo Stampede 2, available in the archives.
No, I'm talking. I did commentary very briefly at Honor Takes Center Stage Chapter 2. Cornette had me jump on the commentary booth for a minute, because it was the night after the Kings lost the belts to Haas and Benjamin. So I even did commentary on live once.
Ooh, I don't remember that.
Mm-hmm. It was brief. But yeah, I don't think there's a single job I did not do for Ring of Honor.
And
almost,
I guess to surmise and end this on a positive note, we were gonna have a miscellaneous section of thank yous, fuck yous, and bye byes. like somebody does on their podcast. But I'm just gonna take away the fuck you and the goodbyes thing, and just some like thank yous. Like who do you want to shout out in a positive note to kind of wrap up your Ring of Honor chapter?
I'm I Jesus, it's a long list. And some of the people who at some points I would have said fuck yous are thank yous because there's good and bad. There's not so much there's not too many people that was an all bad,
Mm-hmm.
But I mean even from the very beginning it's a thank you for Gabe and Pierce and Hunter, you know, for the various ways I was used and incorporated and the opportunities I was given behind the scenes by all three of them to write, especially post game, to write essentially to be the person who essentially steered the stories online. I wrote all the website content for the longest for many many years. It was approved and edited by Adam and by Hunter, but I was allowed to do that. So that kind of steered the narrative. For the people who let me be involved in their things, Chris and Claudio and Sarah, Kevin, Generico, Carino, Cabana, hell, Joe for being in the ring with us, Rocky Romero, Ricky Reyes, obviously for Punk, Brian, got my entire crew, like not all of them, because some of them were shitbags and washed out after a few, but like
Student.
not Stu, Rob Wolf is fine. Now, people you wouldn't even know at all. Moppy, for example, we'll just throw that one out there. Moppy or J Red, people you wouldn't even know. But like my most of my class, Starsmore, Matt Turner, Anthony Franco, at the time, the second class, Pelly, Bobby, Derek, Smash, Eric Santa Maria, Rhett, Grizz, Ernie, Alex. Like, there's so many fucking people who all played a part in this, in my Ring of Honor story. It's too many to list. Logan DeVito in my first match, and just for being generally awesome dudes to us green motherfuckers. There's so many people.
What about the office side?
I mean, obviously Ross, Sid, Cary for keeping us alive, giving me a job, keeping us alive, giving me a job, and taking care of us as his employees. That's the other thing. He wasn't just a boss; he did take care of us, as employees. Always made sure we had a Christmas party, and that may not seem like a big deal, but it is.
It's morale booster.
It's a morale booster when it's like, and it's not just for, the 3 or 4 or 5 of us in the office and him. It was any of the crew who was local come. Zach and Kev Yeager come. Like, it was the everybody that was kind of part of the infrastructure. That's what it was like. It was that family atmosphere that we had back then. God, I mean, Jimmy Fetterman, Rich Trapp, Zach and Kev Yeager back then. I mean, so many. Bobby Durkin was another one who was that helped back in the day for all that stuff. Like, there's so many people who are just big or little pieces of the puzzle that made up Shane Hagadorn. It's like I said, BJ, Cabana, Daniels. I got to do my first live promo with Chris Daniels. Like, what the fuck? I did a live promo with Christopher Daniels.
He was 72.
That was an experience. He was, and yep. It's Homicide. Even if he doesn't remember me, Conan. Having a half-hour heart-to-heart conversation with Homicide in Atlanta at Center Stage. It's this. I don't know. Like I said, I could. It's almost the in so much of the roster over that 10 years had some impact on me. Arias was one of the first people, as much as we bust his balls, he was one of the first people who acknowledged my difficult position to me of being in the locker room as a wrestler and being in the office. It's yeah, I mean, it's a lot. There's a lot up and down the entire roster of that 10 years. A lot of people who came in and out. I guess it's just as a thank you to Ring of Honor. Oh shit! I gotta go pick up Nathan soon.
Yeah.
Well, and goodbyes. It's I don't know. It's wrestling. I never say goodbye.
That's right. And that was what I was looking for on the thank you, fuck you, bye department.
Yep.
And by the way, I do love that Cornette ends his podcast with "Thank you, fuck you, bye." That's where I stole it from.
Completely appropriate too.
Yes, totally appropriate. I love that, and I think this is just a phenomenal sharing. So thank you for sharing that with me, with the audience, and some of this I knew, some of it I didn't know all the details. And listen, in life, I've been fired. I've quit jobs. It is never easy. And when you love your job and it becomes a place you don't love anymore, it is the worst position to be in because it rubs off on every facet of your life.
It is. And that was, it wasn't something, the love wasn't there anymore as much, but it was wanting, it's wanting the company to succeed.
And now everything is good.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's good. We're good. Everything's good. And this show is going to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
We appreciate all the support, and I think Shane has said it all today. He's bared his soul with us, and I really, from one friend to another, thank you.
Well, there's one thing I didn't say.
Oh, no.
The only thing I didn't say was slap the porpoise.
Oh no, we gotta do our social media, and then you can do the slap the porpoise for this week.
Oh. Okay.
It is your episode.
Yeah.
Social media, Twitter and Instagram.
Dangerous!
Yeah, we forgot that one too.
Just wanted to catch you off guard.
And time to pay the bills. We haven't slipped that one in there in a while. But it is time to pay the bills. Social media, at an honorable pod on Twitter and Instagram. At the Jeff Schwartz, Twitter and Instagram. Drop the for Facebook. Partner, where can we find you on social media?
At Hagadorn Shane on Twitter and Instagram. Shane Hagadorn on Facebook. Shane Hagadorn on YouTube. And also an honorable mention on YouTube as well. But you got to search for us because we haven't earned that magical personalized URL yet.
No, but it did see our numbers, and we had 399 hours of listening content this month. So thank you guys for listening and subscribing and giving us a like on YouTube. Twitch.tv/an honorable pod. Facebook.com/an honorable pod. Support the show. Get the shows early, ad-free, video. This one is going to be our very first video episode. So you'll get to see the emotion on our faces, and you'll get to see our interesting setup where we do this show from.
You also get to see me texting our man Joe Feeney and telling him thank you. And now I'm thanking you in public right
here. So you'll get to see that in the background there's like a Dude Love action figure over my left shoulder.
All you see is a trundle bed and some stuffed animals on mine.
So the live version of the show.
Off camera. Here's a Joker pop from the Hush collection. And again, go buy Joe Gacy's awesome shirt.
But Patreon.com, before you buy Joe Gacy shirt, Patreon.
Go buy ours.
Yeah, buy our shirt. Patreon.com/an honorable pod. That's where you can get the video version of the show. The show is early, commercial free, bonus content, bonus shows, including us talking, myself and my friend Big Stu, talking about Survival of the Fittest 2018. It's up now. And there'll be more bonus shows coming December 1st. Send in your suggestions. Of course, we will be doing a whole evening of taping. I can't wait. It's going to be so exciting. December 1st. So all sorts of random shit we're going to cover that night.
The one thing that we have 100% confirmed is we are going to do our own watch along with the Crowning a Champion main event.
60 minutes, guys. And we won't sweat through it like they did. I promise. But you'll see us actually doing the commentary as we watch the match on our computers. ProWrestlingTees.com/an honorable mention. Buy the shirt. Support the show. And you'll get a free DVD from my personal collection if you buy the show. The first batch of DVDs is going out today as we tape this Tuesday, November 6th. So thank you very much to the guys that have bought DVDs or have bought shirts and acquired DVDs in said motion. We want to thank our man, Joe Feeney, of course, the aforementioned head of the Creative Control Network. So be sure to follow Joe Feeney on Twitter at JFF, NEY 3RD, and at the CC Network 1 for all the latest news and notes on the Creative Control Network and their litany of great programming. Be sure to follow our scientist of sound, our astronaut of audio, our purveyor of production, the bassmaster general, the technician of trouble, and now the award-winning Mr. Zach Johnson on Twitter and Instagram at RadioZT as he delivers us the best intro that you have already heard and the best outro that you will eventually hear and makes us sound cooler than the other side of the pillow. This episode of An Honorable Mention you are listening to right now is available on iTunes, the Google Music Play Store, Amazon Echo, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and Hipcast, as well as patreon.com/an honorable pod a couple days early and commercial free for only $5. Next week, Monster Mac joins us for the show.
Ring of Honor OG.
The man that was in the very first segment on a Ring of Honor DVD, The Era of Honor Begins, representing the Hit Squad from Bed-Stuy, Do or Die, Brooklyn, New York. Monster Mac will join us next week. Then we head into the month of November, or the end of November.
I was going to say, you're skipping.
Yeah, we do the conclusion on November 27th. And that's your first show as an employee.
No, my first show as a student.
So you're on crew there. And then we go to December 4th, All-Star Extravaganza 2. December 11th, the TV title tournament from HDNet. It'll be our first real adventure into the HDNet television program. So kind of looking forward to that somewhat. We have the final battle poll, December 18th. So 2003, 2008, 2010, and 2016 are your four choices. December 25th, it is your show, guys. Join us. Send in 5 minutes or less your grievances as we have the first annual, hopefully, honorable mention Festivus airing of grievances. If you had a problem with the talent that was on the roster, somebody you didn't like a booking decision that Gabe or Adam or Delirious made, tell us about it. Give us your details. Plug your social media. If you have a podcast, plug your podcast. This is your opportunity to get some exposure on our show without paying the ad fee. So please submit your clip. It can be a video clip, an audio clip. Either way, it's going to fall into the show. And we'll play it. We'll talk about your grievances. We'll see if we agree or disagree. And it's the honorable mention Festivus airing of grievances. If you aren't familiar with Festivus, check out the Seinfeld episode. It's available all over the world, anywhere you can find it. So be sure to support the show and join us for Festivus We want it to be about an hour long, so Christmas, when you're tired of opening up presents and you got your eggnog you're sipping on around the fire or the tree or Hanukkah menorah.
Bush.
I had to think of what it was called, and I celebrate Hanukkah sort of. Um,
Wow.
yeah, well, there was one year where I thought there were 12 days in Hanukkah because I forgot how many cups I put out because I don't actually own my own menorah, and I don't trust myself using a lighter anymore. So, yeah.
What?
I feel like I'm gonna burn myself every time I use a lighter. So
Oh,
I don't
good
like lighting
Lord.
those candles are dangerous.
You need an adult.
I do need an adult. Seriously, like if I ever get married, my wife is gonna have to do so much stuff. She doesn't know what she's in for. But I guess having said all of that, send your grievances to an honorable mention at gmail.com or to our Twitter. DMs are open. Plug your Twitter, plug your social media, plug your podcast, do whatever. We'll put it in there and make sure it airs unedited. But as I said earlier, there is only one thing left to do. And Shane, this is your show today. Let's hear it.
In the words of the great mayor of an honorable mention, Sal Renaro, no need to trip out. Let's dip out. This one's over. Slap the porpoise. We're out of here.
And
See you next week for Monster Mac.